Hi everyone, we hope you're doing well. We're hanging in there though honestly, we haven't been getting much sleep lately. Today, we want to answer a question we get a lot: how do we publish our audiobooks? First, we post most audiobooks on Patreon as paid content. They stay paid for a few months. After that, they become free to listen to on Patreon forever. A few weeks later, we post them on other places like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, X. Lately, things have been a bit slow in terms of new members. So we'd love your help. Please share our site with your friends or in places like Facebook groups, Twitter, X, Discord, Reddit, or novel forums. Even one share can really help us grow. Thanks so much for your support. Chapter 1: Dragon falls into the dust world. The murderer is you. In the first year, your father, Zhang Yuan, founded a country called Jing. You, who was born in the same year, was appointed as the crown prince. However, you were abducted by traitors. Fortunately, an expert saved you, and you escaped from the calamity. You have obtained a survival reward: immortal cultivation technique, Dao technique. In the second year, you were brought to Longkai Temple by the expert, Taoist priest King Su. You bumped into eldest senior brother training in martial arts and were almost beaten to death. Fortunately, second senior brother saved you, and you escaped from the calamity. You have obtained a survival reward: martial arts, divine shadow leg. In the fourth year, an earthquake struck the capital. The Longkai Temple collapsed, and you were nearly smashed to death by a beam. Fortunately, eldest senior brother saved you. You escaped from the calamity. You have obtained a survival reward: martial art, 9 seeking heavenly dragon steps. In the fifth year, a cold fell from the sky and the flu wreaked havoc in the capital. Unfortunately, you contracted a disease. But third senior sister gathered enough medicinal herbs for your treatment. You escaped a calamity and obtained a survival reward: miscellaneous skill, spring and autumn manual. 6 years after the founding of the country, the founding general, Cao Hubao, rebelled and was suppressed. He hid in Longkai Temple and was bumped into by you. Cao Hubao attacked you, but fortunately, the master saved you and you escaped the calamity. You have obtained a survival reward: the magical weapon, Kylan Horsetail Whisk. Early in the morning, the first ray of sunlight pierced through the green hills and banished the darkness. It shone on the top floor of a pavilion. An ancient bronze bell hung in the air, and a young Taoist priest was in a daze. He was called Zhang Qingshan, and he was 12 years old. Every morning before he rang the bell, he would recall his experiences in the first half of his life to boost his spirits. A night of martial arts training made him sleepy. Fortunately, his duty was very simple. He would ring the bell on time every day and remind everyone that they should get up and recite scriptures. Since he took on this job at the age of 6, he had not encountered any more hardships. His days had become idle. However, relying on the cultivation methods, martial arts, and medical skills he had obtained, his life was not boring. Zhang Qingshan's survival system came from his previous life. In his previous life, he was a game developer, and he had developed a game. The gimmick was that if you can live forever, how long can you live in the cultivation world? Players had an unlimited lifespan, but they could be killed. They would encounter all sorts of difficulties and temptations on their path of cultivation. Zhang Qingshan had tried it himself. At most, he would live for more than 10,000 years, which was very challenging. This game was not a simple game of multiple choice. It had actual gameplay and exploration elements. Even if you were to hide in one place, you would encounter natural disasters. In short, blessings and misfortunes in the game were unpredictable. The game became popular within a short period of time after it was released. However, as he was too excited when he looked at the back-end data, Zhang Qingshan, who had stayed up late for a long time, suddenly died in front of the computer and reincarnated in this life. In this life, he could not guarantee that he would live forever. He would only know after dozens of years. Before that, he had to rely on his survival rewards to become strong enough to face the calamity of his life. The Da technique was stuck at the second level, but he had completely mastered the divine shadow legs and the 9 seeking heavenly dragon steps. The spring and autumn manual was broad and profound, and he had only memorized the contents by heart. As for the magical weapon, he had yet to cultivate spiritual force, so he could not use it. This treasure was kept in the depths of his mind. When he cultivated to the 4th level of the Dao technique, he would be able to master it after cultivating spiritual force. Right now, he only had true energy in his body, and true energy could make martial arts more powerful. As the sunlight shone on him, Zhang Qingshan yawned. He grabbed the wooden stake hanging by his side and began to ring the bell. Dong! The sound of the bell echoed in the mountains for a long time, as if it was driving the flow of time. Coupled with the green mountains and rivers between heaven and earth, it revealed the peaceful and pleasant atmosphere of time. He knocked once and stopped for 5 breaths. After knocking 10 times, Zhang Qingshan finally let go. Today's life of slacking off has begun again. Zhang Qingsheng hummed a tune and started to go downstairs. He was wearing a grayish-blue Taoist robe, and his clothes fluttered with the wind under the sunlight. He had a unique immortal charm. Just as he went downstairs, a 15 to 16-year-old Taoist priest ran over and stopped in front of him. He was panting heavily and sweating profusely. He said in a hurry, "Junior brother Qingsheng, something bad has happened. Last night, a guest died in the temple. Teacher wants you to go to the Clear Heart Palace Hall." "A guest died?" Zhang Qingsheng frowned. He knew that officials from the imperial court had come as guests recently, but he did not expect someone to die. Looking at this senior brother's posture, the identity of the deceased was not low. He was used to secretly practicing martial arts every night, and Lonkai Temple was not small. He did not notice anything unusual last night. He did not think much about it and followed his senior brother to the Clear Heart Palace Hall. "Junior brother Qingsheng, you don't know, but that top scholar is too awesome. Just based on the corpse, we can tell the time of death, the cause of death, and the activities of the deceased before their death." The deceased was an official of the Ministry of Official Personnel Affairs. It was said that his power was not low. Someone actually dared to assassinate an official in the capital. TSK, this is ridiculous. Zhang Qingsheng almost rolled his eyes when he heard his senior brother's words. This was ridiculous. He was the first crown prince of the Jing dynasty, and his mother was even switched. Most importantly, it was not even discovered. That fake was still sitting on the throne, and his name was spread throughout the world. Was it as outrageous as what he had encountered? Zhang Qingsheng sighed internally. This was a world similar to ancient China. When Zhang Qingsheng was in his mother's womb, he could hear the voices outside. This world spoke Chinese, and when he learned that he was born in the royal family, he was very excited. Furthermore, it was during the early stages of the founding of the country. When his father told his mother that he was the crown prince, he felt that he was about to reach the peak of his life. His mother and father were husband and wife. She accompanied his father to rise from the grassland, experienced hardships, fought all over the world, and founded a new dynasty. With such a background, as long as he ascended the throne, he should be able to have a happy life. Unfortunately, things did not go as planned. Evil people were detestable. The past was the past, so Zhang Qingsheng did not think too much about it. The fact that he named himself Qingsheng was enough to show his current aspirations. After half an incense stick of time, Zhang Qingsheng followed his senior brother to the front of the Clear Heart Palace Hall. The Clear Heart Palace Hall was not considered large, and the courtyard was crowded with disciples. Hundreds of people surrounded the place, and there were also servants waiting at the entrance. There were about 20 to 30 people there. When they saw Zhang Qingsheng, the disciples looked over one after another. Even though he kept a low profile in Lonkai Temple, his handsome appearance did not lower his presence. "Junior brother, go in. Teacher is looking for you," a female disciple said. Lonkai Temple was not a traditional Taoist school. It was more like a martial arts sect, with both men and women. Zhang Qingsheng nodded and walked into the hall. At a glance, he saw a corpse covered by a white cloth on the ground. On his right stood the Taoist priest, King Zhu, and his 3 eldest disciples. On his left were the 6 guests who were guests of Lonkai Temple. Standing at the front was a scholarly-looking man, Chen Li, the top scholar Zhang Qingsheng had heard of on his way here. The moment he entered the hall, Chen Li was sizing him up. Zhang Qingsheng came to Taoist priest King Zhu and bowed. "Teacher." Priest King Zhu was the one who saved him when he was young, and he had always respected him. Even though Priest King Zhu looked serious, there were not many rules in the temple. Everyone was his disciple, and there was no difference in seniority between the disciples. They got along very harmoniously. Priest King Zhu held a horsetail whisk in his hand. He had white hair and a sage-like aura. He nodded slightly and said, "Qingsheng, tell benefactor Chen where you went last night." Zhang Qingsheng turned to Chen Li and said, "I went to train last night. My junior brothers and masters know that I have this habit." How could he hide it for 6 years? He had been practicing martial arts since he was 6 years old. At the end of that year, he was bumped into by Taoist King Zhu. He only said that he had comprehended it. In any case, his moves were incoherent when he first started practicing. Taoist King Zhu did not think much of it and even gave him a few pointers. A few years later, eldest senior brother, second senior brother, and third senior sister also discovered this matter one after another. However, they did not reveal it to their other disciples and allowed him to practice martial arts late at night. In the eyes of ordinary disciples, Zhang Qingsheng was just a low-key fellow disciple. In the eyes of the 3 disciples, he was a martial arts prodigy who could create his own martial arts at a young age. Eldest senior brother Li Cheng had created a fist technique when he was young. Now, he was teaching it to his younger disciples. Chen Li asked, "May I ask where you train, little Taoist?" Zhang Qingsheng answered, "In front of the bell tower, I would normally go upstairs and knock on the bell after I finished my training. Then, I would knock it during the day and listen to the Dao techniques. He was very natural and not nervous at all. In any case, he did not kill the victim. Moreover, he did not know the victim at all. A middle-aged man by Chen Li's side said, "Little brother, your skin is delicate and your hands are smooth and calloused. You don't look like a martial arts practitioner. I wonder what kind of martial arts you are practicing?" His aggressive tone was somewhat ear-piercing to Zhang Qingsheng's ears. Chen Li smiled and said, "Little Taoist, don't mind us. We have been investigating for 2 hours, and the people around me have already proved their innocence. They are all mortals and do not know martial arts, so they can only search from your temple. Of course, we are not suspecting your temple. There might be thieves disguised as your temple's disciples." Disguise? Zhang Qingsheng had never left the capital since he was young, let alone the Taoist temple. Therefore, he did not know how skilled the disguise techniques of the outside world were. He answered, "I train in internal arts." Disciples who had reached the age of 6 could name themselves and learn the internal cultivation methods of Longhai Temple. Zhang Qingsheng pretended to learn them, but in fact, he cultivated the natural cultivation methods of immortal cultivation. If you could cultivate immortality, why would you cultivate martial arts? The reason why he mentioned internal arts was because his martial arts were all leg techniques. If the victim died from such martial arts, wouldn't it be too much of a coincidence? Chen Li asked with a burning gaze. Rumor has it that the Zenchi scripture of Longhai Guan is unparalleled in the martial arts world. When His Majesty the Emperor's dragon might was still weak, Taoist King Xi used his Zenchi to save His Majesty in times of crisis. Once his Zenchi is activated, his eyes will become exceptionally bright like pearls in the night. Little Taoist, you have trained for several years, so you should have already started. I wonder if you can show me? Second senior brother Mangekyō smiled and said, "This junior brother of mine is extremely talented. Naturally, he has begun to train his internal arts. Perhaps he might even be proficient in it. Qingsheng, show them." Zhang Qingsheng was embarrassed. He did not train in the Zenchi scripture at all. After all, Taoist priest King Zhu did not know how to check the condition of his disciples. The Zenchi scripture had special effects? Why didn't he know? Zhang Qingsheng began to brainstorm. When they heard Mangekyō's words, the disciples outside the hall discussed among themselves. To be praised by second senior brother, could it be that Zhang Qingsheng was really a martial arts prodigy? Under everyone's gaze, Zhang Qingsheng could only confess. "I'm sorry, I'm not practicing the Zenchi scripture. I like to create my own martial arts. Right now, my internal arts are still being explored. As for martial arts..." Chen Li interrupted, "Coincidentally, you cultivate footwork, right?" Zhang Qingsheng was stunned and looked at Chen Li in surprise. Chen Li bent down and lifted the white cloth. He saw that the victim was a young and strong man with a jade ring on his finger. This meant that it was not a robbery, but an intentional murder. Chen Li pulled open his chest and his sternum collapsed. His injuries were narrow, as if someone had stepped on him. Was it that coincidental? Zhang Qingsheng finally realized that he had suffered. After 6 years of peace, bad luck had come. The deceased involved officials. Once he was arrested and Taoist priest King Zhu could not protect him, it would be troublesome. When Taoist King Zhu saved him, those thieves had also seen Taoist King Zhu's appearance, which meant that they knew where he was staying. Zhang Qingsheng had also heard of their identities during the period when he was abducted by the traitors. There were both civil and military officials, and even the founding fathers were involved. This was a heaven-shocking conspiracy. They must be waiting for Zhang Qingsheng to leave the Taoist temple. This was because as Taoist King Xu had saved the Emperor Zhang Yuan in the past, he was rewarded by the Emperor for his kindness. Therefore, Longhai Temple was the only martial arts sect in the capital. The government offices were not allowed to investigate them, and the army was not allowed to enter their compound. Little Taoist, why aren't you saying anything? Could it be that the murderer is you? Chen Li stared at Zhang Qingsheng with a burning gaze. Chapter 2 Unlimited Lifespan, Unpredictable Blessings. Facing the unfriendly gazes of Chen Li and the others, as well as the surprised gazes of his fellow disciples, Zhang Qingsheng did not panic. Instead, he asked, "That's right, I trained in footwork. However, how did Benefactor Chen know that there are hundreds of disciples in my temple? How are you so sure that I'm the one who did it? Could it be that you've checked all the disciples?" In less than an hour, he had checked the martial arts of hundreds of disciples. This was too unbelievable, unless the other party had made up their mind that the murderer came from Longhai Temple. Chen Li shook his head and said, "Of course not. It rained last night and it only stopped 2 hours ago. Even though it was not heavy, it was muddy all the way up the mountain. If the disciples did not go out last night, the soil on their boots should not have dried up when they came here today. Everyone is the same. Only you have dried soil on your pants, which means that your legs did a lot of exercise last night. Zhang Qingsheng looked down. Indeed, there were many mud stains of different sizes on his pants. The disciples outside the hall were in an uproar as they whispered. He still did not panic. He looked at Chen Li and asked, "Your guess is reasonable, but what about my motive for killing him? I have lived in Longhai Temple since I was young and have never gone out. I have not interacted with you all for the past few days. Why should I kill him?" Taoist Master King Zhu was expressionless, but the three eldest disciples were deep in thought. Even the 5 guests behind Chen Li discussed in low voices. "That's right. Why did he want to kill him?" A wealthy young lady said, "That's right. He died in his room. If this little Taoist killed him, he would have to enter his room late at night to kill. To go this far, how much hatred would there be?" The atmosphere in the Jing dynasty was open-minded, so women could also go out. This young lady from a wealthy family did not travel with Chen Li. It was just that during this period of time, she came to Longhai Temple to cultivate and calm her mind. Her servants were all waiting outside the hall. Zhang Qingsheng began to size up Chen Li and the others. He felt that there was a high chance that the murderer was among them. This guy had true qi in his body. Zhang Qingsheng keenly captured a skinny man with an extremely low sense of presence. Taoism and natural techniques were cultivation techniques. Even though he had yet to cultivate any spiritual energy, his senses were exceptionally sensitive, far exceeding ordinary people. The skinny man was dressed like a merchant, and his physique was thin and weak. It was hard to imagine that he was a martial artist. Moreover, his true energy was very weak and hard to detect, but it could not escape Zhang Qingsheng's senses. These fine traces of true energy were released from some acupuncture points. In other words, this fellow had sealed his true energy in his acupuncture points to create the illusion that he did not know martial arts. Chen Li frowned and said, "There's indeed no motive, but we don't know the motive. We can't just rely on rhetoric to come to a conclusion. We need the Yamen to investigate. I wonder if little Taoist is willing." Zhang Qingsheng suddenly interrupted and asked, "Benefactor Chen said that the people behind you don't know martial arts, right?" Chen Li nodded and said, "That's right. Your 3 senior brothers and sisters have all checked. That meant that their martial arts were not good enough. Why wasn't it his teacher?" He did not dare to ask further as he was afraid that he would tarnish Taoist Master King Zhu's reputation. Zhang Qingsheng asked, "Can I examine it?" Chen Li became vigilant and said, "It's not appropriate. After all, we are currently suspicious." Before he could finish his sentence, Zhang Qingsheng's figure suddenly swayed and turned into after-images. He flew past Chen Li and arrived in front of the skinny man. He raised his hand to grab him, but the skinny man reacted extremely quickly and quickly jumped away, dodging his hand. Chen Li turned around and could not help but widen his eyes when he saw this scene. The other 4 guests were the same. One of them knew martial arts. The servants outside the hall rushed in and surrounded him. The skinny man was no longer as nervous as before. Instead, he revealed a fierce smile. He stared at Zhang Qingsheng and said with a smile, "Little Taoist, I didn't expect your cultivation to be so high that you could even see through my cultivation technique. It seems like you're a genius." Zhang Qingsheng calmly said, "Your movement technique is not simple either." The wealthy young lady retreated and asked in horror, "Zhu Hai, how do you know martial arts?" Zhu Hai smiled sinisterly. "You know me well?" The young lady from the wealthy family was silent. Zhu Hai looked at Chen Li and said, "Scholar, isn't it ironic? If it weren't for the other party's powerful martial arts, would you have forcefully arrested him and convict him at the administrative office? The Chen family has always been like this. You were all like this when the Chu dynasty was still around. The Chu dynasty was a dynasty before the Jing dynasty. At the end of the Chu dynasty, eunuchs were in chaos and the people were struggling. Some righteous people rebelled, causing the collapse of the Chu dynasty and the world to usher in an era of vassal seizing territory. Zhang Yuan was not from a landowning family and was only a martial arts practitioner, but he successfully founded the Jing dynasty. With a martial artist as the emperor, the Jing dynasty ushered in the culture of martial arts, which far exceeded the previous dynasties. Chen Li frowned and asked, "Zhu Hai, why did you kill him?" Zhu Hai did not answer. He suddenly dashed toward Chen Li at an extremely fast speed. Zhang Qingsheng did not move because he was also unhappy with Chen Li. After all, this fellow wanted to bring him to the government office. Humphrey. Taoist Master King Zhu snorted and stepped in front of Chen Li. He raised his palm and struck Zhu Hai's right palm. Zhu Hai's hand was broken and he vomited blood as he flew backward. He broke through the door and windows, startling the disciples outside. This fellow actually knew palm techniques. Then why did he use leg techniques to attack? Zhang Qingsheng suddenly felt that Zhu Hai was deliberately setting him up. Did Zhu Hai bump into him when he was training? After Zhu Hai landed on the ground, He quickly jumped up and leaped dozens of feet high before disappearing from the courtyard. "Chase for me." Second senior brother Mangekyō rushed out and shouted. Immediately, dozens of disciples followed him out of the courtyard. Chen Li was still in shock and nearly collapsed to the ground. Priest Kingsu retracted his hand and held his shoulder. "Benefactor Chen, even though the world has been calm, there are still undercurrents. As the first scholar of the Jing dynasty, you shouldn't walk around casually. Otherwise, the calamity today will repeat again in the future." Chen Li hastily thanked him and then apologized to Zhang Qingshan. Seeing his sincere attitude, Zhang Qingshan did not make things difficult for him. That was the end of the matter. Zhang Qingshan then became the focus of attention. Those disciples who did not chase after the culprit surrounded him and asked him what martial art he had used just now. It was so fast. Even eldest senior brother Li Qingqing and second senior brother Mangekyō were interested. Priest Kingsu said, "Qingshan, you don't have to listen to Taoism often in the future. You can practice martial arts on your own. Other than striking the bell in the morning, you can decide your daily routine." As soon as he said that, the disciples looked at him enviously, including Li Qingqing and Mangekyō. The two eldest disciples still had to teach their junior brothers and sisters. Zhang Qingshan was stunned for a moment before he thanked Taoist Kingsu. Priest Kingsu turned around and left. The disciples outside the hall immediately surrounded him. After dealing with his fellow disciples for a while, Zhang Qingshan found an opportunity to leave. Even that rich young lady was interested in him. He could not stand it. The murder case was temporarily closed. As for whether the murderer had been caught or not, it was none of Zhang Qingshan's business. The other disciples continued their training as usual. He returned to his home alone. In Longkai Temple, there were 4 rooms in one courtyard, and 2 disciples lived in one room. Sitting on the bed, Zhang Qingshan began to organize his thoughts. He was not sure if Taoist priest Kingsu knew his real identity. After he brought him into Longkai Temple, Taoist priest Kingsu did not take special care of him, so he could not ask him directly. Today's incident involved the previous dynasty. After revealing his martial arts, Taoist priest Kingsu actually gave him the greatest freedom, which made his imagination run wild. In the 12th year of the Kaiyuan dynasty, you encountered the remnants of the previous dynasty who committed a crime and were pulled into a calamity. You relied on your abilities to escape danger and obtained a survival reward: martial arts, Diamond Howl. A text that only he could see appeared in front of him, making him smile. Another calamity. If it were not for the fact that he had trained in martial arts for 6 years, he would not have been able to force Zhu Hai to show his skills today. He would probably have been arrested and killed by those nobles. In the future, I still have to work hard and not slack off. What happened today proves that as long as there is a legitimate reason, the court can still find a way to bring me out. Zhang Qingshan thought silently. He also thought of something else. Could priest Kingsu really not see through Zhu Hai's martial arts? In any case, he could not choose to trust others. He could only trust himself. After Zhang Qingshan thought it through, he began to learn the additional martial arts in his mind. Diamond Howl was a martial art that stimulated the meridians in one's throat with true energy. It could make one's voice exceptionally loud to injure enemies. When mastered, it could also expel evil spirits. The words evil spirit made his heart tighten. Could there really be ghosts and monsters in this world? But after thinking about it, he had already reincarnated, so it was not strange for there to be ghosts. If this life was really like the game he designed in his previous life, then his lifespan would be unlimited. He only needed to avoid calamity and continuously cultivate. And sooner or later, he would become an immortal. After becoming an immortal, what was there to be afraid of? For the next few days, Zhang Qingshan was thoroughly annoyed. The disciples were extremely curious about him. During the day, he practically spent all his time dealing with his fellow disciples. At night, he would encounter peeping eyes from his fellow disciples. His junior brother, who was a year younger than Zhang Qingshan, even pestered him. Helpless, he imparted the basic footwork of the 9 seeking heavenly dragon steps to him, and he did not pester him anymore. The days finally quieted down. Zhang Qingshan was cultivating his Dao technique and natural technique in his room. Bang! Junior brother King Ku ran in and excitedly said, "Senior brother, that scholar is here again. He specifically mentioned that he wanted to thank you. Teacher has already agreed. He has already come to the courtyard. Do you want to see him?" Zhang Qingshan frowned and said, "No, just say that he doesn't have to thank me." King Ku was stunned. He had grown up with Zhang Qingshan and was very obedient to him when it came to important matters. Therefore, he nodded and turned to walk out of the house. "Ha ha ha, little Taoist, it seems like you hold a grudge. I was indeed rude at that time. I am here to apologize and also to give you martial arts from the Chen family. I hope you will accept it." Immediately after saying that, they saw Chen Li walking in with a warm smile on his face. The 11-year-old King Ku could not stop him. Zhang Qingsheng said helplessly, "You're being abrupt." Chen Li sat down and took out a secret book with golden thread and blue skin before placing it on the table. This martial art is called the Qi Finger. You can only cultivate it by cultivating your true energy. Unfortunately, my Chen family changed its focus from martial arts to literature 100 years ago. After that, there were no more martial arts prodigies, so I will give it to you today. Chen Li introduced them with a smile. At the mention of his family's history, his tone was somewhat soft. In the Jing dynasty where martial arts were advocated, the Chen family's life was very difficult. Chapter 3 Jiang Matters, Spies in the Temple. Benefactor Chen, if you have the heart, you can directly give it to Longkai Temple. Why did you give it to me alone? Zhang Qingsheng asked as he stared at Chen Li. Chen Li was stunned. Even though he had experienced this child's unusual maturity, he was still shocked. He shook his head and laughed. What kind of status does Longkai Temple have? It's not something I can befriend alone. It's not polite and it doesn't make me look grateful. I just want to befriend the little Taoist. Since the little Taoist has such achievements in martial arts at such a young age, you must be an outstanding talent in the martial arts world in the future. You might even become the top scholar of the martial arts world and serve the royal court. He was the top scholar last year and his background had attracted public discussion. However, books were an important inheritance, and most of them were in the hands of aristocratic families. How could commoners pass the examination? This year, the emperor had specially promoted a double top scholar, one in both civil and in military affairs. The cost of practicing martial arts in this world was not high, as such there were many sects in the world that accepted students. It was just that practicing martial arts required talent, but studying also required talent. Comparatively speaking, it was easier for commoners to stand out in martial arts. Longkai Temple was a Taoist temple personally ordered by the emperor. The Chen family did not dare to befriend Taoist kings directly as it would easily arouse the suspicion of the emperor. Zhang Qingsheng felt that his words made sense. In this world, just hiding alone could not lead to a stable life. Instead, it was beneficial to befriend some influential people. More importantly, even though Zhang Qingsheng had accepted his fate, he was f***ing unconvinced. He had to think of a way to kill that fake prince. Additionally, he would not let go of the nobles behind him. He recalled his memories from 12 years ago. Among the aristocrats he had heard of, there was indeed no surname Chen. Zhang Qingsheng nodded and said, "Then I'll accept it. I can't embarrass you as the top scholar." Chen Li revealed a smile and did not feel any ridicule. As long as the other party accepted it, it would be a good start. The reason why he was so enthusiastic was because of his family's influence. The Chen family needed powerful martial artists too much. They had roped in many martial artists, but all of them were swayed by benefits. Zhang Qingsheng was different, as he was still young. As long as he was given resources, he would devote himself to the Chen family sooner or later. Chen Li began to talk about the murder case. It turned out that Zhu Hai wanted to assassinate him, but he had been staying with Taoist priest King Zhu to ask for Taoist skills. Zhu Hai was also seen sneaking around by the deceased. Out of a sense of officialdom, he interrogated Zhu Hai for a while, but Zhu Hai was annoyed and directly killed him. As for Zhang Qingsheng, he was entirely framed. It turned out that Zhu Hai had seen Zhang Qingsheng training his leg skills from afar. Zhang Qingsheng recalled. He did feel like he was being spied on, but it was fleeting. He did not really see the other party, so he did not take it to heart. I was too inexperienced and was led astray by Zhu Hai's few words. I thought I was smart enough to see through the truth. Chen Li sighed and looked ashamed. Seeing that he could admit his mistake, Zhang Qingsheng's impression of him changed. He asked curiously, "Why did Zhu Hai want to kill you?" Chen Li shot a glance at King Ku. King Ku was stunned for a moment before he sensibly left and closed the door. This matter involves the previous dynasty. My Chen family was originally an official of the previous dynasty, but later on, we lost our way and came back. Zhu Hai is a remnant of the previous dynasty. He wanted to kill me in order to shift the blame to the current dynasty so that those aristocratic families who surrendered would realize that the imperial court was not friendly to the families that came from the previous dynasty. Unfortunately, he failed, Chen Li said helplessly. The Chen family was really aggrieved. They were in an awkward position in the current dynasty and had to face the retaliation of the previous dynasty. Zhang Qingsheng did not sympathize with him. Who asked you to be the first scholar? The nail that sticks out gets hammered. From Zhu Hai's point of view, it was understandable. Traitors were much more hateful than enemies. Chen Li did not say much about the disputes in the court. Knowing that Zhang Qingsheng had yet to leave the mountain, he talked about interesting things in the martial arts world. The powerful figures in the martial arts world fought against the 8 great sects alone and shocked the martial arts world. The divine monk was injured and poisoned by the waiter of the Black Inn. Someone had sneaked into the room of the saintess of the Xuanian Tower and stolen her belongings. The Gimu evil king was captured by the imperial court and thrown into the dungeon. Zhang Qingsheng listened with relish. Chen Li had also taught him about the ranks of martial artists. From the lowest to the highest, they were divided into third-rate, second-rate, first-rate, and true energy realm. If one could allow the true energy in their body to attack the enemy through martial arts, then they would have stepped into the true energy realm. Zhu Hai was a true energy realm expert who had trained for nearly 20 years. Zhang Qingsheng made a comparison. He felt that it was not difficult for him to kill Zhu Hai. He had benefited from his natural Dao techniques. He had only mastered the second level, but the true energy in his body was enough for him to wantonly use his divine shadow legs and the 9 seeking heavenly dragon steps. Cultivation was still the best. After an hour, Chen Li finally left. Zhang Qingsheng looked at the secret book on the table and fell into deep thought. Could the secret book be poisonous? Spring passed and autumn came. Several months had passed since Chen Li left. The leaves on the Lonkai temple gradually turned yellow. Zhang Qingsheng's days returned to normal, and the disciples were no longer curious about him. His junior brother, King Ku, rarely disturbed him because he was also intoxicated by martial arts and could not extricate himself. Speaking of changes, the biggest change was that Zhang Qingsheng could also openly train in the day. His true energy had been increasing, and he had already mastered the initial stages of the Diamond Howl. As for the Chi Finger, he had yet to train it. He wanted to completely master the Diamond Howl before he trained the Chi Finger technique. Chen Li did not come again, and Taoist priest King Zhu did not see Zhang Qingsheng alone after the murder. On this day, Zhang Qingsheng had finally reached the third level of the natural technique, and his senses had been greatly improved. He could even hear the sounds of mosquitoes thousands of feet away. He could even hear the breathing of other disciples. This feeling was extremely strange. His true chi did not increase, but he could clearly sense a slight change in his true chi. Perhaps it was a trend towards spiritual power. Several hours later, he came to the courtyard. The disciples had yet to return to the courtyard and were still listening in the Taoist hall. He began to cultivate the Diamond Howl. When he cultivated the Diamond Howl, he did not need to shout at the top of his lungs. He only needed to clear a hidden meridians in his throat. When his true energy resonated, he could determine the power of his shout. In the past, it was hard to activate the invisible meridians. After his cultivation method broke through, he discovered that the process of pouring true energy into the invisible meridians had become smoother and did not hurt as before. Zhang Qingsheng was very happy. As expected, cultivation methods were his foundation. He would still have to spend most of his time on cultivation methods in the future. In the evening, King Ku returned to the house. Senior brother, second brother intends to bring 15 disciples down the mountain to train. He specially asked me to ask you, are you willing to go? King Ku excitedly asked. Almost all of them were orphans. Every time they trained, they would bring back a group of new disciples. After going up the mountain, King Ku had yet to leave the mountain. He was curious about everything at the foot of the mountain. He had heard from the guests that a prosperous era was coming and the war could no longer be seen in the human world. Zhang Qingsheng shook his head and said, I won't be going. King Ku persuaded him a few more times, but he still refused to go. King Ku could only give up. Down the mountain? Impossible. Unless his strength was invincible, otherwise, Zhang Qingsheng would never leave the mountain. Lonkai Temple was in the capital, and those influential people who were spying on him would definitely still be watching. After all, if his identity were to be exposed, he would be beheaded. Once the true dragon was furious, no matter how powerful an official was, they would have to get down from their horses. Over the years, the emperor had purged many factions and countless meritorious officials had died. The next morning, second senior brother Mangekyō brought a group of disciples down the mountain, including King Ku. Zhang Qingsheng did not send him off. Instead, he continued to train in front of the bell tower. At night, Zhang Qingsheng was about to get up. In the 12th year of the initial era, a spy urged second brother to lure you down the mountain, but you rejected him. You avoided a calamity and obtained a survival reward miscellaneous alchemy. When he saw the notification, Zhang Qingsheng was stunned and almost spat out a vulgar word. A spy? There was a spy in Lonkai Temple? First of all, excluding his second senior brother, Mangekyō, he was almost killed by his senior brother who trained in martial arts when he was 2 years old. It was Mangekyō who saved him. However, this time, Mangekyō was persuaded to bring him out. Wait a minute. Could it be eldest senior brother? That time when he was 2 years old was not a mistake, but a deliberate act? Zhang Qingsheng began to think about who would look at him strangely on normal days and who would be able to do so. He even suspected King Ku. Even after thinking for a long time, he still could not figure it out. However, they were sure that it would be dangerous to go down the mountain. As long as Taoist priest King Zhu was still in the Taoist temple, villains would not dare to act recklessly. What Zhang Qingsheng had to do now was to work hard to grow and hide his strength. In the previous murder case, he only showed his talent in martial arts, but it had already attracted the attention of spies. As for the divine shadow legs, the diamond howl, and the cultivation techniques, he must not show them. Fortunately, he rarely showed off. Zhang Qingsheng stood up and walked towards his courtyard. When the disciples greeted him along the way, he would respond with a smile and silently judge. Since he had refused to go down the mountain, the spy should still be there. All of them were suspects. The autumn leaves in Longhai Temple were covered by white snow. After nearly 100 cycles of the sun and the moon, the white snow melted and a new spring arrived. In the 13th year after the founding of the dynasty, Zhang Qingsheng was 13 years old. This year, the emperor went crazy and started to pursue immortal arts. He recruited all the capable people in the world to refine pills for him. There are no immortals in this world. Those evil spirits are merely transformed from demons. For the sake of immortal arts, His Majesty has even ignored the state affairs. Fortunately, His Highness the Crown Prince is smart by nature. He is familiar with the 4 books and 5 scriptures and has already started to help with some of the political affairs. Chen Li sighed with emotion, and his words were filled with admiration for the Crown Prince. Zhang Qingsheng's expression did not change, but he was unhappy. To be able to hold such power at the age of 13, that little bastard had some ability. Zhang Qingsheng asked curiously, "Is His Highness the Crown Prince so outstanding? Can you tell me about him?" Chen Li smiled and said, "Of course. Speaking of which, the Crown Prince's fate is quite unfortunate. He was appointed as the Crown Prince by His Majesty before he was born, and he became the Crown Prince before he was born. Looking at history, he is the only one. However, after the Empress gave birth to the Crown Prince, she fell seriously ill and was in a coma for several months before she woke up. When she woke up, she lost her mind and said that the Crown Prince was not her son. Without the care and concern of a mother, another prince was born. The Crown Prince could be said to have experienced the fickleness of human nature in the palace. Even His Majesty treated him coldly. Fortunately, he was smart at the age of 3 and could compose poems at the age of 5. He also obtained His Majesty's favor. When he heard this, Zhang Qingsheng could not help but think of his mother in this life. When he was in his mother's womb, he often heard his mother talking to herself about how good she would be to him in the future and how reckless the emperor was. He felt a little sad. It turned out that other than evil people, there were still people in this world who talked about him. Zhang Qingsheng asked curiously, "How is the Empress right now? Is she still the Empress?" Chen Li glared at him and said, "Of course. His Majesty and the Empress are so loving that the heavens pity them. Now that the Empress has recovered and her relationship with His Highness the Crown Prince has been repaired, the country is peaceful and prosperous. The Empress has contributed to this." Zhang Qingsheng was speechless and felt slightly relieved. In any case, at least she was living well. Chapter 4 Killing Trick Again. First meeting with the true dragon. Chen Li only brought some gifts with him for this visit. After chatting with Zhang Qingsheng for 4 hours, he left. He was already working in the capital, so it was not easy for him to squeeze out time to visit him. During this period, Chen Li also asked him if his martial arts had improved. He kept a low profile and replied that he was still improving, but he did not specify how strong he was. He could not guarantee that Chen Li was not an enemy, so he was very careful when interacting with him. Half a month after Chen Li left, the new year arrived. There was also a New Year's gift in the Jing dynasty, indicating the change between the old and the new. Longhai Temple was a place of cultivation, so the new year was not lively. After the new year, Mangekyō returned with his fellow disciples. When he left, there were 16 of them. When he returned, there were 20 of them. Among them, there were 3 infants in swaddling clothes and 5 sloppy youths. In other words, they had lost 4 disciples. King Ku had also lost an arm and was no longer as lively as before. When Zhang Qingsheng saw him, he was shocked and asked with concern. However, King Ku smiled freely and casually recounted his encounters in the pugilistic world. "Senior brother, you're right. Outside the mountain is not as good as here. There are no wars, but the human heart is unpredictable." King Ku sighed. Zhang Qingsheng could not comfort him and could only pat his shoulder. The next morning, King Ku trained in the courtyard early in the morning. The disciples of the same academy already knew of his plight, so they did not disturb him. After Zhang Qingsheng knocked the bell, he trained on the side. He was used to training alone, which made him feel safe. The return of this batch of disciples had shocked Longhai Temple for a long time because even second senior brother was injured. The dangers of the pugilistic world far exceeded their imagination. A month passed before the Tropic of the Underworld at the foot of the mountain completely disappeared. Long Kai Quan also became lively because of the addition of 8 new disciples and 3 young children, causing the disciples to often revolve around them. Zhang Qingsheng had completely mastered the Diamond Howell and the Qi Finger and was focused on the Dao technique. Martial arts focused on one's internal strength. With powerful internal strength, it was easy to cultivate outer sect martial arts. However, Zhang Qingsheng cultivated an immortal cultivation technique. Zhang Qingsheng's senses were exceptionally strong. He had sensed that the true energy of his 3 eldest disciples was far less than half of his. Even Taoist priest King Zu's true energy was only about the same as his. From this, it could be seen the difference between immortal cultivation and martial arts. However, he was not arrogant. True energy was only one aspect, and strength had to be measured by other factors. Furthermore, his body was still growing. Chen Li maintained the same frequency as he did once every half a year. Every time Zhang Qingsheng saw him, he could feel his fatigue. The top scholar who once solved a murder in high spirits had become a stressed and tired official. The emperor's pursuit of immortal arts became more and more serious. He would often get angry in the court, and officials would be sacked at the drop of a hat, causing the hearts of the officials in the court to be in turmoil. Time flew by. It was the 14th year after the founding of the dynasty. The 14-year-old Zhang Qingsheng was almost 1.7 meters tall, and he had a handsome appearance. His long hair was tied up behind his head with a straw rope, revealing his forehead and his temples. His appearance was extremely outstanding in Longkai Temple. Some female disciples were secretly fond of him, but he was only obsessed with cultivation. According to the rules of Longkai Temple, if one wanted to start a family, they had to leave the temple. It was a summer day that year. On the bell tower, Chen Li sat on the ground and wiped the sweat on his forehead. His face was full of worry as he said, "Qingsheng, aren't you hot? Why don't you stay in the house to avoid the heat?" Zhang Qingsheng sat on the railing. He looked as if he would fall at any time, but he was as stable as Mount Tai. He closed his eyes and answered, "If my heart is calm, it will naturally turn cold." "You're getting more and more like Priest King Su." Chen Li sighed with emotion and then began to complain. "The emperor is getting more and more muddle-headed. He actually asked someone to dig a canal that runs from the north to the south and extends as far as the sea. This is not something that can be done in 10 to 20 years. I heard that he only wanted to use it to facilitate the transportation of medicinal pills. This is ridiculous, simply outrageous." Zhang Qingsheng opened his eyes with a strange expression. "Canal? Wasn't this Yang Wang's operation in Chinese history?" The more Chen Li spoke, the more indignant he felt. Digging a canal required too much manpower and resources. Not only would the state treasury be tight, but the people would also not have a good time. If this continues, we will have to fight again and attack the surrounding dynasties. Alas, the golden age is gone. Chen Li said with a worried expression. Zhang Qingsheng could not comfort him. From the looks of it, if the Jing dynasty were to fall into chaos, Longkai Temple would not be safe. Zhang Qingsheng felt a sense of urgency. Even though his true energy far exceeded Taoist priest King Zu, he had many enemies. He had to make the best use of his time to cultivate to the 4th level of the Dao technique. Chen Li left after an hour. He could not take it anymore and was about to faint from the heat. Zhang Qingsheng watched him leave and noticed that Chen Li was starting to hunch his back. It was really a waste of time. Even though Zhang Qingsheng was 14 years old in this life, he was more than 40 years old after combining the age of both his past and present lives. Thus, he had always been sensitive to the passage of time. His body was in the prime of his youth, so he had the feeling of time being much slower in the mountain than outside the mountain. A month later, eldest senior brother Li Chengqing found Zhang Qingsheng and asked him if he was willing to go down the mountain to train. Zhang Qingsheng directly rejected him. Another trap to kill him? Li Chengqing left in disappointment. After all, the matter of going down the mountain could not be forced. 3 days later, Li Chengqing led his 15 disciples down the mountain. The youngest of them was only 13 years old. Zhang Qingsheng had been waiting for the notification. As expected. At noon the next day, a line of words appeared before his eyes. In the 14th year after the founding of the dynasty, a spy persuaded eldest senior brother to lure you down the mountain, but you refused. Hence, you avoided a calamity and obtained a survival reward, the miscellaneous time calligraphy. Calligraphy? Zhang Qingsheng was disappointed. It seemed like the size of the calamity would determine the reward. In his spare time, he had completely mastered the alchemy that he had obtained previously. Unfortunately, he did not have a medicinal cauldron to refine pills. Calligraphy was pretty good. Longkai Temple had always had guests from high-ranking officials coming to recite poems and have fun. There were many 4 treasures of the study in the temple, all gifted by the guests. It was not a bad thing to cultivate one's feelings when one had nothing better to do. After all, other than training, life here was really boring. On that day, Zhang Qingsheng would come back with a brush, ink, and paper. He would practice calligraphy in his room while thinking about the spy. This was the second time that he was called to come out of the mountain. Fortunately, he had already found a way to find the spy. After all, he had asked Zhang Qingsheng to leave the mountain twice. He only needed to ask his eldest senior brother and second senior brother. At night, King Ku returned to his room. He had just washed his feet. As he sat on the bed and wiped his feet with a cloth, he said, "Senior brother Qingsheng, the emperor is coming to Longhai Temple tomorrow. Do you want to take a look? That's the current emperor after all. He is a person who is very hard to meet." Hearing this, Zhang Qingsheng's right hand trembled slightly. He calmly asked, "What's so good about the emperor? Does he have one more mouth than us?" King Ku forced a smile and said, "Don't say that. Be careful not to spread the news. Since you don't want to go, then don't go." Zhang Qingsheng raised his hand and admired his writing. He smiled and said, "It's not that I don't want to go. In any case, I have nothing to do." 3 words were written on the paper. "Not a gentleman." The next afternoon, Zhang Qingsheng walked on the stone path between the courtyards. He had just finished cultivating his Dao technique and was prepared to see his father. From 1,000 feet away, he could already hear the discussions of his fellow disciples. "Is that the emperor? He's so wise and mighty." "That's right. I heard that the emperor has trained in the aura of a true dragon, just like a living dragon. I'm curious if the emperor has found any immortal pills." "Don't talk nonsense. If you are heard, you will be beheaded." The closer Zhang Qingsheng was to the Minxin Palace Hall, the less he heard. Soon, he heard the conversation between Emperor Zhang Yuan and Taoist priest King Su. The two of them were reminiscing about their glorious days. Most of the time, it was Zhang Yuan who spoke with much emotion. On the other hand, Taoist Master King Zu just agreed with him calmly. Outside the courtyard near the Minxin Palace Hall, there were golden-armored imperial guards guarding it. No outsiders were allowed to approach. Mangekyō and a group of disciples waited on the emperor's path. It was a small stream that ran through Longhai Mountain. There was a small bridge that spanned across it, and the flowers and plants on both sides of the stream were extremely dense. There were dozens of people in the stone pavilion by the small bridge, and it was so crowded that the pavilion seemed to be breaking. Mangekyō was bragging about what he had seen and heard during his previous outing. When he saw Zhang Qingsheng walking over, his eyes lit up and he said, "What a rare guest. Junior brother Zhang, why are you here? Come in and make way." The 3 seated disciples hastily stood up while the other standing disciples made way for him. Zhang Qingsheng was the only disciple that Taoist King Su allowed to cultivate freely and not need to listen to the Tao. His status was special, and coupled with the fact that he usually acted alone, the disciples were very distant from him and did not dare to offend him easily. Zhang Qingsheng sat down in the pavilion and asked with a smile, "Second senior brother, why are you in the mood to tell a story?" The 3 eldest disciples of Longhai Quan were all martial arts fanatics. Eldest senior brother Li Changqing was talented, while Mangekyō's talent was average. However, the latter relied on his diligence to make up for his lack of talent and had won against Li Changqing. Mangekyō smiled and said, "Naturally, I am here to take a look at the aura of a true dragon. Rumor has it that the emperor is like a dragon. How can I not pay my respects?" The word "pay my respects" was said with some skill. Zhang Qingsheng and his fellow disciples began to chat. The disciples were refreshed by his arrival, and Mangekyō was even more so. Mangekyō was curious about Zhang Qingsheng's current strength. He had looked for Zhang Qingsheng last year and proposed a spar. However, Zhang Qingsheng directly admitted defeat and said that he was not qualified. As a senior brother, he could not forcefully attack, so he could only forget about it. An hour later, a group of golden-armored imperial guards walked over, and Taoist priest King Zu and Zhang Yuan appeared in their line of sight. The disciples walked out of the stone pavilion one after another and knelt down to pay their respects. Zhang Qingsheng was the same. After all, there was nothing wrong with kowtowing to his biological father. When Zhang Yuan approached, Zhang Qingsheng could not help but look up and meet Zhang Yuan's gaze. Zhang Yuan wore a golden dragon robe and a light crown on his head. He had a dignified expression and there were gray hairs on his temples. He happened to walk over and his gaze lowered. When his gaze met Zhang Qingsheng's raised gaze, Zhang Qingsheng stiffened and hurriedly lowered his head. He had imagined countless scenarios of meeting Zhang Yuan, and he had even thought of laying his cards on the table. However, how could he convince Zhang Yuan? There were no witnesses. Priest King Zu only happened to save him outside the palace. "Little Taoist, look up." Just as Zhang Qingsheng's mind was in a mess, Zhang Yuan's voice sounded. He did not look up, thinking that Zhang Yuan was calling for some other disciples. Taoist priest King Zu's voice sounded, "Qingsheng, His Majesty is calling for you." Zhang Qingsheng subconsciously looked up and met Zhang Yuan's gaze again. He did not hide his nervousness, as it would be strange if he was not nervous when he saw the emperor. He noticed an old eunuch behind Zhang Yuan with his head lowered and his back bent. His physique was extremely weak, as if half of his body was buried in the ground. What powerful vital energy! It was even stronger than Taoist priest King Zhu. Zhang Qingsheng remembered him. It was this old dog that brought him out of the palace. However, it was not this old dog that fought with Taoist King Su. On the way, he was handed over by many people. Zhang Qingsheng did not pay much attention to the old eunuch. Instead, he lowered his eyes and said, "Greetings, Your Majesty." Chapter 5 Seal of Life and Death, Prince Apprentice, 1. The Tao technique was a cultivation technique. Even though what Zhang Qingsheng had cultivated was true energy, the Tao technique was aligned with nature, as this technique emphasized integration with nature. Therefore, the aura of his true energy was something a martial artist could not pry into. At most, they could sense a trace of faint true energy in his body. Zhang Yuan looked at Zhang Qingsheng, who was kneeling in front of the pavilion and was in a trance. He sighed and said, "I heard from Chen Li that you have outstanding martial arts at such a young age. It can be seen that you are talented. The great Jing needs a genius like you." Zhang Qingsheng replied, "Thank you for your praise, Your Majesty." It turned out that Chen Li had put in a good word for him. More than once, Chen Li had suggested that he take the martial arts top scholar examination. Even though he did not know how powerful he was, the 12-year-old him had stunned Chen Li. Zhang Yuan smiled and continued to leave. Zhang Qingsheng lowered his head. He had the urge to stand up and acknowledge his family, but reason told him that the time was not right. It was too dangerous. They had not seen each other for so many years. How could they acknowledge each other? Did they have to rely on blood to acknowledge each other? Even if he succeeded, there would be many conflicts in the palace. Moreover, once he revealed his true identity, Zhang Yuan would be furious. Once that happened, he would kill more people, which would increase the hatred he would incur. At that time, how would he deal with himself when he returned to the palace? If he had to be on tenterhooks every day, how could he cultivate? He had to have the strength to be fearless of any danger before he could reveal his true identity. Zhang Qingsheng suddenly felt a gaze. He did not need to look up to sense that it was the old eunuch. There was a spy in Longkai Temple, so the old eunuch naturally knew his identity. This gaze did not stay for long. After they left, Zhang Qingsheng and the others stood up. Mangekyō excitedly said, "Sure enough, junior brother Qingsheng, even His Majesty remembers you." The other disciples from the same sect were also very excited. The female disciples looked at him with extraordinary splendor. At their prime, it was inevitable for girls to be in love. Furthermore, Zhang Qingsheng's handsomeness could be said to be unique in Longkai Temple. Zhang Qingsheng shook his head and laughed. "It's useless. There might be more trouble instead. I'll take my leave now. You can continue chatting." With that said, he left. Mangekyō did not stop him. Instead, he was thinking about a problem. How powerful was junior brother Qingsheng right now? He had to find an opportunity to compare notes. After returning to his room, Zhang Qingsheng sat on the bed and cultivated. Naturally, his Tao technique was profound, and he did not know how many layers there were to it. Only after successfully cultivating would he unlock the memories of the next layer. It was not until nighttime that King Ku returned. Ever since he experienced the outside world, King Ku had been reticent. He was usually immersed in martial arts, and his appearance and temperament seemed to be more mature than his actual age. King Ku glanced at Zhang Qingsheng and did not say anything else. He also sat on the bed and meditated. Several days later, Chen Li came to visit Zhang Qingsheng again. Beside the Tao belt, Chen Li excitedly said, "Not bad, Qingsheng. His Majesty actually praised you. Yesterday morning, His Majesty talked about the martial arts in country, hoping to recruit martial arts practitioners to become top scholars and enlist in the army. He even specially mentioned you. He said that there is a young Taoist priest in Longkai Temple who has the strength of a first-rate expert at the age of 14. How is it? Are you going to be the martial arts top scholar? With His Majesty's words, no one will use tricks on you. As long as your martial arts are strong enough, you will be unimpeded." Zhang Qingsheng shook his head and said, "My martial arts are not strong enough. Moreover, I am still young and not suitable to enter the world too early." Chen Li was stunned for a moment before he sighed. "Qingsheng, you have such foresight at such a young age. You have seen through the secular world. I even wonder if you are a god that has descended to the mortal world." He had never seen such a calm young man. Even in the face of great benefits, he was not moved. Soon after, he changed the topic and said, "Your eldest senior brother has made a name for himself in the martial arts world, but he is now trouble. Priest King Su has probably left the mountain already." Hearing this, Zhang Qingsheng opened his eyes. Eldest senior brother Li Chengqing was like an elder in Longkai Temple. Even though he was obsessed with martial arts, He had a gentle temperament and took good care of his fellow disciples. Zhang Qingsheng also had a favorable impression of him. He asked curiously, "What trouble?" Chen Li said helplessly, "Naturally, it's because of love. For some reason, he had a relationship with a woman from the evil sect and was captured by the evil sect. The evil sect said that Taoist King Su had personally gone to rescue him." Zhang Qingsheng frowned. His first reaction was that it was a trap. Could it be that some aristocrats colluded with the evil sect to send Taoist priest King Su away so that Longkai Temple would have no experts to protect him? He could not eliminate that possibility. Even if it was a coincidence, those guys would not let go of this opportunity. Ever since Zhang Qingsheng came to Longkai Temple, Taoist priest King Su had not left the mountain. For those nobles, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Zhang Qingsheng did not panic. In terms of true energy in his body, he was several times stronger than Taoist priest King Su. He had also mastered martial arts, but he did not have any actual combat experience. When the time came, he would just have to be careful. After all, this was the capital, the other party should not dare to make a scene. Chen Li continued to talk about Li Qingqing. Li Qingqing had brought his fellow disciples to travel the martial arts world and acted chivalrously. And by chance, he saved a woman. That woman threw herself at him and only later found out that she was a disciple of the evil cult and the daughter of the sect master, making her status very special. What's more, was that woman actually vowed to marry Li Qingqing. This news had spread throughout the martial arts world and even to the inns in the capital. Longkai Temple was the only sect in the capital, and it had a special status in the martial arts world. When such a thing happened to Longkai Temple, the people in the martial arts world naturally found it refreshing. Chen Li spoke for an hour, but before he left behind a bag of medicinal ingredients. These medicinal ingredients were suitable for martial arts practitioners to consume. They were very precious and could not be bought even with money. Zhang Qingsheng looked at his departing back and silently noted down this favor. Then, he began to think about how to face the possible enemy attacks. After Taoist King Su left, second senior brother Mangekyō took charge. That night, the Longkai Temple was in chaos. It ushered in a lively night that was rarely seen in dozens of years. The disciples were jubilant and noisy. At this moment, Zhang Qingsheng was cultivating in his room. Although he was disturbed, but he was too embarrassed to go out and shout. Suddenly, Zhang Qingsheng opened his eyes and narrowed his eyes. "Why are you in such a hurry?" He sensed the aura of someone on the eaves, and that person did not make any sound as he crawled. If he was an ordinary martial artist, he might not have noticed it. Not long after, a strange fragrance spread down from above. Bewitching fragrance. Zhang Qingsheng immediately held his breath. With Dao technique as his cultivation method, he could hold his breath for an hour, far exceeding ordinary people. After half an incense stick of time, he pretended to collapse on the bed. A figure leaped in from the window. The assassin was a disciple of Longkai Temple. He was in his early 20s and had an ordinary appearance. He stared at Zhang Qingsheng on the bed and thought to himself, this guy is pretty skilled that he could last for so long. He pulled out a dagger from his sleeve and carefully walked to the bed before stabbing Zhang Qingsheng's chest. At that moment, Zhang Qingsheng suddenly raised his legs and grabbed the assassin's arm. He somersaulted backward and lifted the assassin before smashing him onto the bed. This series of actions was too fast. Before the assassin could react, Zhang Qingsheng sat on him and subdued him. The assassin circulated his true energy, wanting to force Zhang Qingsheng back, but he was horrified to discover that he could not shake him off. What terrifying skills! This kid is definitely above first rate. The assassin was shocked and his eyes widened. Zhang Qingsheng saw the other party's true appearance and said, "Fifth senior brother, what are you doing?" The assassin gritted his teeth and soon, blood overflowed from his mouth. He had committed suicide by consuming poison. Although Zhang Qingsheng did not have the time to stop them, he was not disappointed. He searched the assassin's body but found nothing. He then shouted, "There's an assassin!" He shouted dozens of times. King Ku was the first to rush in, followed by the other disciples. Zhang Qingsheng sat paralyzed on the bed, panting heavily with a frightened expression. Mangekyō squeezed through the crowd and quickly stepped forward. When he saw the deceased, his expression changed. Fifth junior brother. The other disciples were also shocked. Even though fifth senior brother did not have a strong sense of presence, he did not make enemies with other disciples. Mangekyō noticed the dagger in the assassin's hand and his expression darkened. He went forward to examine it and quickly came to a conclusion. He committed suicide by consuming poison. He instantly realized the severity of the matter. If they were in conflict, why would he hide poison in his mouth? He looked at Zhang Qingsheng, hoping that he could say something. Zhang Qingsheng pretended to be shocked and furious. He gritted his teeth and said, "I don't know why fifth senior brother attacked me. He wanted to kill me, but I captured him. Then, He consumed poison and committed suicide. This was his room, so he had confidence. King Ku added, Senior brother Qingsheng usually trains alone and has no grudge against other disciples. Even if he does, it's not right for 5th senior brother to come to our room and assassinate us. Moreover, he committed suicide by consuming poison. It's obvious that he has a guilty conscience and is afraid that he will be questioned. The other disciples nodded and expressed their opinions. There were also some who questioned Zhang Qingsheng. After all, the dead were of great importance. Mangekyō took a deep breath and said, Junior brother Qingsheng, from today onwards, you will stay in your room. King Ku will be responsible for delivering your food. Until master returns, the disciples in the courtyard will take turns to guard and protect junior brother Qingsheng. Zhang Qingsheng had no objections. Although it was said to be protection, it was actually to supervise. After all, no one knew the truth. Mangekyō led his men to bring the assassin's corpse out. King Ku comforted him, Senior brother Qingsheng, don't be afraid. I will always guard outside. Zhang Qingsheng nodded and watched him leave. This incident stopped the hustle and bustle of Longkai Temple and it fell into the silence of the past. Zhang Qingsheng heard many disciples discussing this matter, and all of them felt that something was amiss. Why did 5th senior brother want to kill Zhang Qingsheng? Inside the house, Zhang Qingsheng sat down again and began to cultivate. He began to calculate what kind of experts the other party would send in the future. In the 14th year after the founding of the dynasty, an assassin attacked Yu and was subdued by Yu. The assassin consumed poison and committed suicide. Yu survived a calamity and obtained a survival reward martial arts, the seal of life and death. A notification appeared in front of him. While the disciples were still outside, he immediately accepted the inheritance of the seal of life and death. The seal of life and death was a type of true energy martial arts. One could strike a mark on the enemy's meridians and acupoints, making them wish they were dead. It was a torturous martial art. It was not fatal, but it was painful. This martial arts was good. If he caught an enemy again, he could interrogate them. However, Zhang Qingsheng knew very well who his enemies were, so he did not need this martial arts for the time being. However, learning another martial art would be useful in the future. For the next 10 days, Zhang Qingsheng was not attacked. Perhaps it was because there were disciples taking turns to guard the courtyard that the enemy did not dare to act rashly. At noon that day, a commotion broke out in the courtyard. How dare you? This Highness want to meet someone, but you won't allow me to? I wouldn't dare, I wouldn't dare. It's just what? Junior brother Qingsheng was attacked by an assassin. We are protecting him. Impudent. Are you tired of living? Do you think I want to kill him? After a commotion, the door was rudely pushed open and a luxuriously dressed young man angrily ran in. He looked to be 11 or 12 years old and behind him were two purple-robed men with burly physiques. Each of them held a saber. When the young man saw Zhang Qingsheng, his eyes lit up. He immediately rushed over and asked excitedly, Are you an immortal priest? Zhang Qingsheng's surname was only known to himself. He usually went with the name Qingsheng. Zhang Qingsheng walked down from the bed and cupped his hands. May I know who you are? The young man smiled proudly and said, I am the 4th prince. I am here to learn martial arts. Zhang Qingsheng asked in surprise, Why me? The 4th prince shot a glance at the two guards behind him and the two of them immediately retreated to the door. The 4th prince stepped forward and went to Zhang Qingsheng. In a low voice, he said, Father said that you are very powerful and asked me to acknowledge you as my teacher. Have any other princes looked for you? Chapter 6 Heaven Prison in the Capital, Evil King strikes the 4th prince, Zhang Yu. Zhang Qingsheng knew him. He learned from Chen Li that Zhang Yu was his biological younger brother. He was born by the emperor and the empress. It was said that it was because of Zhang Yu that the empress was no longer crazy. When he heard that the emperor had instructed Zhang Yu to come, Zhang Qingsheng's imagination ran wild. Could it be that the emperor had already recognized him? Why did he not acknowledge him directly? Zhang Qingsheng could not ask about this directly. Instead, he asked, You want to find me to practice martial arts? Zhang Yu excitedly said, That's right. Father said that you are only 2 years older than me, but you have already surpassed the first-rate realm. You have to be my teacher. I will satisfy whatever you want. Gold, silver, treasures, and rare treasures, just tell me. Zhang Qingsheng thought about it. With his relationship with the prince, at least he would not be so passive in the future. He did not have to hide at all. After all, his enemies knew he was here. Since it's His Majesty's order, I naturally can't refuse. It's also my honor to be able to teach Your Highness martial arts. However, let me say this first. The martial arts I will teach you are all my own creation, not the martial arts of Longkai Temple. Zhang Yu was overjoyed and was about to kneel and kowtow. The two guards turned pale with fright. Fortunately, Zhang Qingsheng supported Zhang Yu in time. This kid was really rash. Asking the prince to kowtow was a huge crime. Zhang Qingsheng said helplessly, "I'm not your teacher. I'm just teaching you martial arts. You can call me by my name in the future." Zhang Yu straightened his back and grinned. "All right, Brother Qingsheng." He impatiently urged, "Brother Qingsheng, quickly teach me. My goal is to learn unparalleled martial arts, expand the territory, and flatten the wilderness. I also just turned 12 a few days ago. In the past, my father did not allow me to practice martial arts before I turned 12, so you are the first person to teach me martial arts." Zhang Qingsheng thought for a moment and decided to teach Zhang Yu the Divine Shadow Leg. The Divine Shadow Leg was the first martial art he had learned. It was powerful and fierce. One kick could destroy tendons and break bones. He had already reached the powerful realm of releasing true energy. Zhang Qingsheng began to teach Zhang Yu the cultivation method of the Divine Shadow Leg. The two guards avoided arousing suspicion and retreated outside the door before closing it behind them. Zhang Yu listened attentively. An hour later, Zhang Yu happily left. He had to return to the palace to train, since a prince could not stay outside randomly. King Ku returned to the room and excitedly asked, "Senior brother, are you the teacher of the prince now?" Zhang Qingsheng shook his head and laughed. "I'm only teaching His Highness martial arts. How can I be his teacher?" "Don't talk nonsense." King Ku disagreed. "Isn't that still praiseworthy? In the future, the prince will be your backing. When I roamed the world before, I discovered that this is a world of favors. If you do the same thing with different identities and relationships, the result will be completely different." At this moment, he seemed to have thought of something sad and his smile disappeared. Zhang Qingsheng had always been curious about what he had experienced, but he would never say it. The room fell into silence. After a while, King Ku bid farewell. Zhang Qingsheng was left alone in the room, and he could finally cultivate in peace. After the first assassination attempt failed, the enemy would certainly launch a second attempt on his life, so Zhang Qingsheng had to become as strong as possible. Zhang Qingsheng was already strong enough with his third-level cultivation of the Dao technique. For the time being, he had yet to encounter anyone with more true energy than him, but even so he could not relax. How could an immortal cultivator be killed by a group of ordinary warriors? Dusk fell, and dark clouds shrouded the prosperous capital as a gentle rain fell. The peddlers on both sides of the street began to close their stalls. The undulating vermilion tower was covered with a layer of mist, and the entire city became foggy. In the western part of the capital, in front of the gates of the sky prison, Zhang Tanren, who was dressed in armor, frowned as he looked at the sky. His brows were filled with worry. A middle-aged general patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile, "Young man, don't always have a lot on your mind. The leader has already submitted your name on the register. You can participate in the martial arts examination next year." Zhang Tanren had just turned 18 this year. His mother was already pregnant with him when she was imprisoned. After giving birth to him, she was beheaded. As for him, he was brought up by the prison guards. The older generation of prison guards treated him as their own son and taught him all kinds of martial arts. As repayment, he worked hard and repeatedly made contributions. Zhang Tanren retracted his gaze and shook his head. "I have a feeling that something is about to happen to the sky prison." "Nonsense. Who would dare to break into a prison under the emperor?" The middle-aged officer scolded him jokingly, and the other guards nearby laughed. In the capital, Sky Prison was the safest place. Their responsibilities were also very simple. They enjoyed their current life. They were not tired and their salary was high. Zhang Tanren smiled helplessly. He also felt that he might have thought too much. Ever since the founding of the country, even though there had been several rebellions in the capital, Sky Prison was always the most stable place. Night gradually fell and the rain stopped. The trees by Sky Prison dripped with raindrops, causing ripples in the potholes on the ground. Just as Zhang Tanren was chatting with his brothers about what to eat for dinner, he suddenly heard a melodious sound of a flute. He looked up and saw that the pavilions on both sides of the street in front of the gates of Sky Prison were closed, and he could not see anyone. "What's that sound? I don't see anyone. Why can't I hear anything? 2 years ago, you were discovered by your evil wife when you went to Fragrant Restaurant. She slapped you so hard that your ears hurt. Of course, you can't hear anything." As the guards discussed, a middle-aged general's expression changed drastically and he cried out in alarm, "Oh no! Cover your ears." Even though the guards were frightened, they still subconsciously covered their ears, including Zhang Tanren. All of a sudden, Zhang Tanren saw a thick fog at the end of the street. A figure was faintly discernible in the fog, and he could tell from the figure that the figure was playing the flute. Someone wants to break into the prison? This thought popped up in Zhang Tanren's mind. Just as he was about to speak, the ground shook. Rumble! Everyone tried their best to steady their footsteps. Zhang Tanren sensed something and subconsciously turned his head. With a loud bang, the door of Sky Prison exploded, and the thick door was blasted into countless wooden thorns. Zhang Tanren's cheek was cut, and he widened his eyes. A figure stepped out of the prison. This person was wearing shabby prisoner clothes with his hands and feet trapped in chains. His hair was disheveled and his back was hunched as he breathed heavily. He raised his head and revealed a pair of white eyes without pupils under his messy black hair that flickered with a cold glint in the night. Ghost-eyed. Evil King. One of the guards trembled and fell to the ground. The Evil King stepped forward. The chains on his feet were even wrapped around the neck of a jailer, dragging him out of the darkness while he was still alive. His eyes were bulging and his face was flushed red. His hands grabbed the chains as he tried to break free. When Zhang Tanren saw this scene, his eyes turned red. He immediately drew his sword and rushed towards the ghost-eyed Evil King. The Evil King suddenly rushed to him and choked his neck with his right hand. Then, he angrily smashed him to the ground, causing gravel to fly everywhere. Zhang Tanren almost fainted. His internal organs were severely damaged and he could not help but vomit blood. The ghost-eyed Evil King grinned. His smile was extremely hideous, just like an evil ghost in the human world. Just as he was about to end Zhang Tanren's life, the sound of the flute suddenly stopped and a voice floated over. "Don't forget about the important matter." Hearing this, the ghost-eyed Evil King stopped and leaped dozens of feet high. While doing so, he dragged the jailer, who was wrapped in chains, into the forest and quickly disappeared. A large number of jailers ran out of the cell door, most of them injured. The middle-aged general ran to Zhang Tanren to check on his injuries. Zhang Tanren stared at the direction where the ghost-eyed Evil King disappeared, and his heart was filled with frustration. He originally thought that he was strong enough, but he did not expect to be defeated in a single blow. Inside the house, the oil lamp flickered. Zhang Qingshan was currently meditating when he suddenly felt uneasy. He had a feeling that something was about to happen. He opened his eyes and thought, there are no frogs croaking tonight, so there must be killing intent around here. He felt the surging true energy in his body and felt slightly at ease. The enemy should not be much stronger than Taoist priest King Su. Otherwise, he would have just forcibly killed him. After the time for an incense stick to burn, Zhang Qingshan suddenly heard shouts from the foot of the mountain, but they were too far away for him to hear them. The enemy would not force their way in, right? Zhang Qingshan frowned and thought. No matter what, this was the capital and a Taoist temple appointed by the emperor. If this matter were to blow up, the emperor would definitely investigate. At the same time, on the mountain path halfway up the mountain, the ghost-eyed Evil King walked on the stone steps with his hands around the neck of a Taoist priest. The jailer dragged by the chains behind him was covered in blood and no longer looked human. Under the moonlight, thunderclouds suddenly gathered and a bolt of lightning streaked across the night sky, making the capital seem as if it was daytime. The ghost-eyed Evil King's face was illuminated in an instant, looking so hideous and terrifying. How dare you? How dare you break into Longkai Temple? A Taoist priest's furious shout came from above. A Taoist priest rushed over with a sword in his hand. He leaped up and stabbed with his sword. The blade cut through the night sky, revealing a cold glint. The ghost-eyed Evil King's right hand broke the priest's neck before he slapped out with his palm. True energy exploded and turned into a bloody wind that collided with the sword-wielding priest. PFFT the Taoist priest was hit by the blood wind. He vomited blood and fell down like a kite with a broken string before smashing onto the steps below. He covered his chest and wanted to stand up, but his blood and chi attacked his heart and he fainted. Longkai Temple? That's all. They merely obtained the favor of the true dragon. The ghost-eyed Evil King snorted, and his hoarse voice was filled with disdain. He quickened his pace and dashed up the mountain like a ghost. The door opened and King Ku ran in. He said in horror, "Senior brother, thieves are coming up the mountain. Senior brother ordered you to go and support them." When Zhang Qingshan heard that, he immediately stood up and walked out of the room with King Ku. Arriving at the courtyard, Zhang Qingshan leaped and disappeared into the night. King Ku stood rooted on the spot. He gritted his teeth and hurriedly chased after him. In front of the gate, the ghost-eyed Evil King stopped. He released his hands and the two corpses fell. Lightning flashed across the night sky, illuminating the stone steps behind him. Corpses were everywhere and blood flowed down the stone steps into the darkness. Inside the gate, Mangekyō stood on a small bridge with his sword in hand. He glared at the ghost-eyed Evil King and shouted, "Who are you? Why did you commit a massacre in my Longkai Temple?" The ghost-eyed Evil King grinned and said, "Those who are about to die want to drag some down with them. Since old man King Su is not here, you can die first." He suddenly dashed towards Mangekyō like lightning. Mangekyō's expression changed and he quickly waved his sword. Streaks of sword chi slashed out towards his opponent. The ghost-eyed Evil King struck out with his palm, and the wind from his palm was domineering. It dispersed the sword chi and sent Mangekyō flying. He crashed through the wall of the pavilion behind him, raising rolling dust. A group of trash. I didn't expect that my last battle would be to kill a group of chickens and dogs. The ghost-eyed evil king retracted his hand and snorted in disdain. He walked towards Mangekyō, but he suddenly stopped after taking a few steps. Chapter 7 Godly leg shakes the capital, sword control technique rumble thundercloud surged, and it was still raining in the night sky. The rain was getting heavier and heavier. The third senior disciple of the Longkai Temple, Mangekyō, stood in front of the ghost-eyed evil king with his sword. The rain soaked her Taoist robe. Even though she was a woman, there was no fear on her beautiful face. The other Longkai Temple disciples in the surrounding buildings all looked nervously at the ghost-eyed evil king, shivering, not daring to attack. The ghost-eyed evil king stood rooted on the spot and did not move forward. He did not look at Mangekyō either. Instead, he stared at the night sky behind Mangekyō. There was a figure looking at him from the top of a building. I didn't expect there to be another expert in Longkai Temple other than that old man Kinksu. So the target is you. The ghost-eyed evil king smiled sinisterly. Mangekyō frowned, not understanding what he meant. Mangekyō coldly said, "Devil, you've massacred my temple's disciples. When my master returns, he will not forgive you. Moreover, this is the capital city. I've already sent my fellow disciples to report to the government office. The capital city is an inescapable net. You won't be able to escape." The ghost-eyed evil king ignored her and said with a smile, "Your Excellency, why aren't you attacking? Why aren't you escaping?" Only then did Mangekyō realize that the other party was not staring at her at all. She turned around and saw a building behind her. She could not see anything more than 1,000 feet away. The surrounding disciples were also weak. Who was the top expert that the devil mentioned? From what you said, you're here for me. Could it be that the previous assassination was also arranged by you? Zhang Qingsheng's voice echoed in the night sky, making it difficult to identify the source of the voice. Hearing Zhang Qingsheng's voice, Mangekyō and the other disciples were stunned. They naturally remembered Zhang Qingsheng's voice, but was he a top expert? The ghost-eyed evil king smiled sinisterly and said, "Oh? There's another assassination attempt? It seems like it has failed, but you're dead this time." He leaped up and landed on the roof of the pavilion behind Mangekyō. The group of disciples hastily gathered and retreated to the entrance of Longkai Temple. They looked around and finally saw Zhang Qingsheng. Zhang Qingsheng stood on the eaves of the Mingxin Palace Hall. From afar, his true appearance could not be seen. He stood upright, and under the thunderclouds and night sky, he emitted an indescribably powerful aura. "Junior brother Qingsheng." Mangekyō muttered to herself as she gripped the sword in her hand. Zhang Qingsheng looked at the ghost-eyed evil king with a cold gaze as killing intent rose in his heart. Even though the opponent's true energy is not half of mine, it is much stronger than my master. From the looks of it, he must have experienced hundreds of battles. I cannot be careless. I have to give it my all. Zhang Qingsheng thought to himself. He began to mobilize the true energy in his body and his Taoist robe fluttered. The ghost-eyed evil king quickly rushed towards Zhang Qingsheng and jumped on the eaves. Both sides rapidly approached each other, and this scene made the disciples of the Longkai Temple extremely nervous. Could Qingsheng withstand such an evil demon? Mangekyō and the other disciples thought worriedly. The ghost-eyed evil king leaped up and poured his true energy into his right palm. His smile was so cruel, and his eyes were filled with excitement. "Die, kid." Under the night sky, lightning and thunder intersected and both sides were illuminated. When the distance between the two sides was less than 50 feet, Zhang Qingsheng suddenly moved. He leaped up at a speed that the ghost-eyed evil king could not catch and kicked out. His figure was like a ghost, and when his leg landed in the ghost-eyed evil king's eyes, an afterimage appeared. It was as if dozens of legs were attacking the ghost-eyed evil king at the same time. Bang! Zhang Qingsheng kicked the ghost-eyed evil king's chest in midair. Accompanied by the crisp sound of bones breaking, true energy exploded along his right foot and the ghost-eyed evil king was sent flying. How is it possible? The ghost-eyed evil king widened his eyes and revealed an expression of disbelief. Blood spewed out from his mouth uncontrollably, leaving an arrow of blood in the night sky. He flew past the pavilions and over the heads of the disciples. He crossed the cliff and fell to the foot of the mountain before disappearing into the clouds. Mangekyō and the other disciples were dumbstruck. They could not believe their eyes. At the foot of the mountain, a large number of jailers and soldiers rushed over. Zhang Tanren also ran over with a spear in his hand. Under the light of the torch in his left hand, his neck was flushed red. "Are you sure this is the direction?" One of the generals frowned and asked in a confused tone. Zhang Tanren nodded and said, "That's right, this is the direction." The general hesitated. "The direction is in Long." Before the general could finish his sentence, they heard a gust of wind from above, startling them so much that they subconsciously turned around. A figure descended from the sky and smashed onto the steps at the foot of Lonkai Mountain, causing gravel to fly and blood to splatter on the ground. The soldiers were shocked and hurried to surround him. "It's the Ghost Tide. Evil King. He's dead." One of the guards cried out in shock, causing Zhang Tanren and the general to rush over to take a look. They saw the Ghost Tide Evil King lying on the stone steps with his limbs twisted uncomfortably. His chest had collapsed, and ghastly white bones could be vaguely seen. He died with remaining grievances, and his eyes were filled with fear, as if he had seen the most terrifying thing in the world. Zhang Tanren was moved. He looked up at the mountain in front of him. Under the night sky, thunderclouds surged. The Lonkai Mountain seemed so mysterious. After the general checked the Ghost Tide Evil King's injuries, he said in a deep voice, "He was kicked to death by an extremely ferocious leg technique. He was killed in one blow. The difference in strength between the two sides is huge." Huge disparity in strength? Zhang Tanren came back to his senses and recalled the scene when the Ghost Tide Evil King killed his way out of the prison. His expression was complicated. Inside the house, Zhang Qingsheng returned to his room and closed the door. He breathed a sigh of relief. He was both excited and nervous. This was his first time killing an enemy and the first time he went all out. Fortunately, he did not fail. After killing the Ghost Tide Evil King, he was surrounded by his fellow disciples. However, the disciples were not too excited. After all, many of their fellow disciples had died. Second senior brother Mangekyō was severely injured, and right now, the Lonkai Temple was managed by third senior sister Mangekyō Shuang. Mangekyō Shuang asked him to return to his room to rest in advance to avoid any more villains from coming to kill him. That night was the most tragic disaster Lonkai Temple had experienced in dozens of years. At least 20 disciples had died. Zhang Qingsheng sat on the bed. He did not blame himself. He just was wondering if the enemy would attack again. In the 14th year after the founding of the dynasty, the Ghost Tide Evil King attacked you and was killed by you. You survived a calamity and obtained a survival reward, the spell, Royal Sword Technique. A line of words appeared before Zhang Qingsheng's eyes. He smiled. Finally, it was no longer martial arts, but magic. He immediately began to accept the inheritance of the Royal Sword Technique. It was a sleepless night. Early in the morning, Zhang Qingsheng was still cultivation, and there were 4 disciples guarding the courtyard. They were all discussing last night's incident in low voices. Zhang Qingsheng's performance had shocked everyone, but there were also some who complained about him and believed that he was the one who summoned the evil demons. However, Zhang Qingsheng was also an orphan, so they could not say for sure. They could only guess based on the Ghost Tide Evil King's words. Zhang Qingsheng's hearing far exceeded that of ordinary people, so he naturally heard those comments. However, he did not care. He was not a teenager. He was an adult who had lived 2 lives. In this life, he only wanted to survive for as long as possible, and he did not have the time to worry about the death of others. Furthermore, how could a martial arts sect in the capital not suffer calamities? Zhang Qingsheng cultivated in peace. Without a sword, he could not cultivate the Royal Sword Technique. Therefore, he still focused on his cultivation techniques. It was not until Chen Li came to pay a visit that his cultivation was interrupted. However, this time, Chen Li did not come alone, but was accompanied by another person. This is the Minister of Justice, Minister Yang. He is here to investigate the matter of the Ghost Tide Evil King. Not only did the Ghost Tide Evil King kill the disciples of Lonkai Temple, but he also killed several prison guards. This matter has alarmed the imperial court. His Majesty was furious and ordered a thorough investigation. Chen Li introduced. When Zhang Qingsheng heard that, he cupped his hands and bowed. In the Great Jing dynasty, the position of the minister could be regarded as the second rank of the official position. There were less than 10 people who had more power than the Minister of Justice. Yang Shangshu sized up Zhang Qingsheng with a strange look in his eyes and asked, "Do you know the Ghost Tide Evil King? He's the villain who attacked Lonkai Temple last night. I heard that he was killed by you." Zhang Qingsheng answered, reporting to the minister, "Qingsheng has been an orphan since he was young and has been staying in Lonkai Temple. Other than Scholar Chen and His Highness the 4th Prince, he does not recognize anyone else outside the mountain." Yang Shangshu expressionlessly said, "Then tell me what you saw." Zhang Qingsheng answered truthfully. After Yang Shangshu made his decision, he turned around and left, leaving only Chen Li and Zhang Qingsheng in the room. "Not bad. Your martial arts are so powerful that you can even kill the Ghost Tide Evil King. I heard that he was kicked down the mountain by you and fell to his death?" Chen Li no longer pretended to be serious and said excitedly. Zhang Qingsheng's strength made him feel that his investment over the years was not for nothing. Even though Chen Li had never roamed the martial arts world, he had heard of the Ghost Tide Evil King's infamous reputation. He then talked to Zhang Qingsheng about how the imperial court had captured the Ghost Tide Evil King previously. Zhang Qingsheng shook his head and said, "He saw that I was young and was careless. Chen Li waved his hand and said, "What are you being modest for? Your legwork has surprised even the generals guarding the capital. That ghost-eyed evil king is an expert above the true energy realm. According to the hierarchy of the martial arts world, he is known as a top expert. This kind of martial artist can freely retract their true energy and is not someone ordinary people can defeat." Zhang Qingsheng silently noted it down. Third rate, second rate, first rate, true energy realm, top expert. The third level of the Dao technique could easily kill a top expert. The gap between cultivation and martial arts was huge. Chen Li recounted the situation of the case. Sky Prison was an important place in the capital, but a death row prisoner had escaped. The emperor had lost face, and the jailer responsible for guarding the ghost-eyed evil king had been ordered to be executed. They still had to continue to investigate the people at all levels of Sky Prison. This was also the reason why the Minister of Justice had come in person. If the investigation was not done well, his position as the Minister of Justice might not be guaranteed. The position of the minister was so high that if it were any other dynasty, how could it fall so easily? However, it was different in the Great Qing dynasty. Most of the important officials were meritorious officials of the founding dynasty. The emperor had always wanted to pull them out, and there would be a change of ministers almost every year. Naturally, the 6 ministers were walking on thin ice. Your identity and background are very simple. Taoist King Xu has reported the household registration of every disciple, so you don't have to worry. You have contributed greatly to killing the ghost-eyed evil king. His Majesty will reward you when the time comes. Tell me, what do you want? If His Majesty mentions it in court, I can speak up for you." Chen Li shook his teacup and said with a smile. He could be considered as having a good time. After a night, all the aristocrats in the capital knew that a young top expert had appeared in Longkai Temple. He could even kick the famous ghost-eyed evil king to death. He must have a bright future in the martial arts dynasty. All first-rate experts were proud and arrogant. The Chen family had only managed to rope in a top expert, but the other party was still not in the capital. They could only summon him if there was anything. However, Zhang Qingsheng was different. He lived in the capital and was an orphan. It was not impossible for him to rope in him as a member of the Chen family. Chapter 8 Famous swords are too good, breaking through to the 4th level. If I can really get a reward, help me get a sword. I've recently gained some comprehension about sword techniques, and I want to see if I can create a sword technique. Zhang Qingsheng smiled. After all, Chen Li was a top scholar and his family head was the Minister of Revenue. He could indeed have a say in the court. Chen Li immediately agreed. The two of them did not chat for long. After all, Minister Yang was still outside. When the door closed and Zhang Qingsheng was alone in the room, the smile on his face disappeared. He began to worry if his enemies would send stronger experts. He hoped that the enemy was not too strong so that he could get more survival rewards. From what Chen Li said, even though a top expert was powerful, they were not rare. This meant that there was a higher realm above top expert. After all, a top expert was only a title for people in the pugilistic world, not a realm. Zhang Qingsheng needed time to become stronger. Fortunately, Zhang Qingsheng's worries were excessive. For the next few days, soldiers came every day, and Zhang Qingsheng was also talked to many times. He was confident and not worried at all. Due to the surprise attack of the ghost-eyed evil king, the death of 5th senior brother had also been concluded. He was fighting back in self-defense. It was reasonable and there was sufficient evidence. The logic also made sense. However, due to the lack of motive, the officials of the government, the Ministry of Justice, and Sky Prison were puzzled. Who was behind all this and why did they want to kill Zhang Qingsheng? Zhang Qingsheng had hoped that Zhang Yuan would come to see him in person so that he could lure out the truth. However, Zhang Yuan did not come. The emperor was busy every day and was not attracted by such a case. 5 days later, when the 4th prince, Zhang Yu, arrived, he excitedly said, "Brother Qingsheng, was the leg technique you used to kill the ghost-eyed evil king the divine shadow leg you taught me?" Zhang Qingsheng nodded, and Zhang Yu became even more excited. He began to recount the sensational impact of this matter. Everyone in the palace was discussing it, and it was said it even spread to all over the world. An immortal Taoist priest from Longkai Temple killed the ghost-eyed evil king at the age of 14. At this age, such achievements were indeed surprising. Zhang Qingsheng was secretly pleased when he heard that, but he was worried that it would cause more trouble. "Even my brother is interested in you and said that he would pay you a visit if he had the chance," Zhang Yu said with a smile. Zhang Qingsheng's expression did not change, but killing intent rose in his heart. The fake prince also wanted to look for him. It was not easy to move. It was better to live ignobly and wait until he was strong enough before taking revenge. The two of them chatted for a while more before Zhang Qingsheng began to point out Zhang Yu's confusion on the divine shadow leg. Zhang Yu listened attentively and after an hour, he had gained a lot. After thanking him one last time, he left. This time, Zhang Yu did not come empty-handed and delivered some pastries from the palace. After Zhang Qingsheng tasted it, he felt that it tasted pretty good. Compared to the light dishes in Longkai Temple, it could be said to be delicious. Not bad, not bad. Let him bring more next time. Zhang Qingsheng thought happily. That day, an army was sent to guard Longkai Mountain, and the days when the disciples were on tenterhooks ended. A month later, Taoist priest King Zhu returned and the army withdrew. All the disciples gathered in the Clear Heart Palace Hall and lowered their heads to face Taoist priest King Zhu. The atmosphere in the hall was gloomy and Zhang Qingsheng also lowered his head. Mangekyō and Mangekyō knelt in front of Taoist priest King Zhu with their foreheads pressed against the ground. Taoist master King Zhu looked much older than before he went down the mountain. There were wrinkles between his eyebrows. He must have been extremely worried. Alas! A heavy sigh broke the silence in the Clear Heart Palace Hall. Taoist King Zhu said, "Get up." In the face of a peerless expert like the ghost-eyed evil king, even I am not completely confident. You have done well. The dead are gone. Don't worry about it from now on. Mangekyō and Mangekyō stood up, but they still did not dare to look up, especially Mangekyō. His fists in his sleeves trembled. In the past month, his temperament had changed drastically, and he was no longer as cheerful as before. He had a gloomy expression all day long, and the disciples did not dare to speak to him. Taoist priest King Zhu looked at Zhang Qingsheng and said, "Qingsheng, you did well. You saved Longkai Temple." Zhang Qingsheng hastily bowed and said that he had just fulfilled his duty. Taoist King Zhu did not say much about that. Instead, he said, "Your eldest senior brother has switched to that evil sect. From now on, he will no longer be the first disciple of Longkai Temple. Ke will be the first disciple, Kai Shuang will be the second disciple, and the third disciple will be Qingsheng." As soon as he said that, the disciples looked up and asked excitedly. Li Qingqing was the head of the family in Longkai Temple, and he had a close relationship with his fellow disciples. No one, including Zhang Qingsheng, hated him. Mangekyō's expression was extremely ugly. He was not excited to be the first disciple. Zhang Qingsheng was not surprised to be promoted to the third disciple. With his achievements, his status as a disciple of Longkai Temple could be mobilized. Of course, only when a disciple passed away would other disciples replace him. He could understand Li Qingqing's betrayal. The word love harmed people. But as long as it did not affect his safety, he didn't care. He was an immortal cultivator. 100 years later, everyone around him would turn to dust and sleep underground. Taoist Master King Zhu did not say anything else. He waved his horsetail whisk and motioned for the disciples to retreat. Even though the disciples were excited, they had no choice but to retreat. Zhang Qingsheng hesitated. He thought that Taoist priest King Zhu would talk to him alone, but he did not. He did not seem to care about the death of his disciples. He returned to his room alone, still confused. Taoist Master King Zhu's attitude towards him was obviously strange. Did Taoist Master King Zhu know his identity? He did not listen to him. Even if something big had happened to him, he did not hold him accountable. Something was really wrong. Zhang Qingsheng thought of many possibilities. He even thought that Taoist priest King Zhu might also be an enemy. Of course, this thought was a little dark. However, in this life, he had to pursue longevity no matter what. Immortality, becoming an immortal and becoming a god were his goals. After Taoist priest King Zhu returned, Longkai Temple completely calmed down. The disciples were no longer worried and their days returned to normal. The disciples were all orphans and had more or less experienced separation in life and death. They were not always immersed in sadness, but there was only one person who was deeply affected. Mangekyō. He began to practice martial arts crazily and received the same treatment as Zhang Qingsheng. He no longer listened to Tao and devoted himself to martial arts at the edge of the cliff. This made King Ku say to Zhang Qingsheng that his new senior brother's enthusiasm to practice martial arts was as if he did not care about his life. Zhang Qingsheng did not meddle in other people's business and comfort Mangekyō. He did not have the ability to do so. Time continued to pass. Unknowingly. It was the 15th year after the founding of the dynasty, and Zhang Qingsheng was 15 years old. His true energy had been increasing, but he was still a step away from the 4th level of the Tao technique. The winter snow had yet to completely melt when Chen Li came to visit. This time, he brought a huge gift with him. "Ha ha ha, Qingsheng, you've picked up a treasure. I helped you ask His Majesty for a sword." With a single order from His Majesty, he spent several months to obtain a famous sword from the pugilistic world. This sword is called the Tai Hang sword, and it's said to be one of the top 10 swords in the pugilistic world. Chen Li smiled and placed his sword on the table, producing a crisp sound. Zhang Qingsheng asked in surprise, "Why did His Majesty make such a fuss?" Chen Li shook his head and said, "His Majesty only said one sentence and my subordinates ran until they broke their legs." Longkai Temple is located in the capital and is a Taoist temple personally appointed by His Majesty. A prisoner in Sky Prison has massacred its disciples and it involves too many departments of power. In order to please His Majesty, my subordinates naturally have to do their best. This is also to appease the anger in His Majesty's heart. Moreover, in the martial arts world today, swordsmen are weak and the prestige of the top 10 swords is inferior to the previous dynasty. Zhang Qingshan was suddenly enlightened. He came to the table, picked up the scabbard, and pulled out the Tai-Hang sword. The sword light dazzled, making him squint. Chen Li was also dazzled. He lamented, "This Tai-Hang sword is definitely a divine weapon. I've tried it before. It can cut through iron like mud. This sword light can also confuse the enemy." Zhang Qingshan sized up the Tai-Hang sword. It was more than 3 feet long, and the blade was 3 fingers wide. It looked slender, and there were strange patterns carved in the middle of the blade. The blade on both sides was slightly cyan, and the hilt was also exquisite. It was comfortable to hold. Not bad, not bad. I like it. Thank you, Brother Chen. Zhang Qingshan praised. This sword was handsome and worthy of his appearance. Chen Li smiled and then talked about the result of the case. Sky Prison would be remodeled to pursue greater defensive capabilities. More than 30 officials of various sizes had been stripped of their posts, and no less than 5 had been beheaded. The highest-ranking officials involved third-ranked officials. During this period of time, the capital could be said to be in a storm, and everyone felt insecure. Every day, officials would supervise the city. The emperor suspected that there was someone else behind the ghost-eyed evil king, but in the end, they could not find the culprit, and thus, the case came to an end. As for Longkai Temple, the emperor gifted it with a lot of money and food as a form of appeasement. Zhang Qingshan had no objections, and he had no right to express his opinion. After Chen Li said that, he left in a hurry. He had been promoted recently, and it was a busy time for him. Zhang Qingshan did not stay in the house. Instead, he went to the bell tower. There were very few disciples around here because the buildings here were storerooms that stored firewood, grain, and other goods. He began to mobilize his spiritual energy according to the mental cultivation method of the imperial sword technique. He first had to make the Tai-Hang sword soar into the air before he could ride the sword. This process was very difficult, but he felt refreshed and full of fighting spirit. Riding a sword was the essence of cultivation. How could a dignified immortal cultivator always use martial arts against their enemies? After the tragedy ended, those aristocrats who wanted to kill Zhang Qingshan quieted down. Zhang Qingshan lived a peaceful year when he was 15 years old. He did not encounter any more calamities or disasters. In the 16th year after the founding of the dynasty, Zhang Qingshan was 16 years old. On a summer afternoon, he finally mastered the 4th level of the Dao technique, and the true energy in his body began to transform into a stronger form of energy. Spiritual force. The energy of an immortal cultivator. From that moment on, he could be considered as someone who had truly gone through extraordinary. In the future, he could cultivate magic and use magic weapons. The Kailine horsetail whisk he obtained when he was 6 years old was still in his mind. He had never used it before, so he had been looking forward to using it. Zhang Qingshan made a comparison. His spiritual force was 10 times that of his true energy before he broke through. It was huge, and his senses had doubled in sensitivity. His hearing could cover the entire Longkai Temple. At the same time, he had also developed a divine consciousness. A divine consciousness was the eyes of the soul. It could penetrate matter and pry into the outside world to pry into the essence of things. A drastic change. Zhang Qingshan was in a good mood and felt that he did not have to worry if more enemies came. Compared to when he killed the ghost-eyed evil king, his strength had advanced by leaps and bounds. It could even be described as being reborn. It took Zhang Qingshan 2 days to consolidate his cultivation and master his spiritual force. He now could even fly on his sword, but he did not dare to be too ostentatious and ended after a little test. He was not sure if there were other immortal cultivators in the world or if there were any warriors that could rival him. He could not act recklessly. Chapter 9 Mystic Weapon, Are you willing to be the abbot? The bright moon hung in the sky, and the stars twinkled. In the courtyard, a group of disciples stood on a 4-sided corridor and shouted excitedly. They were watching King Ku spar with Zhang Qingshan. Zhang Qingshan stood rooted on the spot without moving. His left hand was behind his waist and his right hand was blocking King Ku's moves. No matter how King Ku attacked, Zhang Qingshan could easily resolve it and push it away. At the age of 16, he was handsome and considered outstanding among the crowd. King Ku had practiced the 9 seeking heavenly dragon steps that Zhang Qingshan had taught him. This footwork was exquisite, but it did not have any substantial offensive power. Therefore, King Ku's offensive move was a martial arts technique of the Longkai Temple. It had to be said that most of the martial arts in Longkai Temple were weak. In Zhang Qingsheng's opinion, it was no different from the traditional martial arts on Earth in his previous life. Zhang Qingsheng pushed King Ku away with one hand again. King Ku took 7 consecutive steps back, staggered, and fell to the ground. King Ku helplessly called out, "No more." The surrounding disciples cheered and praised third senior brother for his prowess. Ever since he reached the 4th level of the Dao technique, Zhang Qingsheng would occasionally guide other disciples. As a result, the image of his third senior brother was established and his prestige rose day by day. Just as Zhang Qingsheng was about to ask who else wanted his pointers, the courtyard door was pushed open. Everyone turned around and immediately ran back to their rooms in fright. King Ku hastily got up and quickly ran back into the house, leaving only Zhang Qingsheng and the newcomer in the courtyard. "Third junior brother, you have to sleep early in the night. Don't let these little bastards cause trouble." Mangekyō walked to Zhang Qingsheng and said earnestly. He frowned and a few strands of white hair appeared on his temples. In a short span of 2 years, he had become a completely different person. The once lively and cheerful second senior brother had now become a gloomy man who was obsessed with martial arts. Zhang Qingsheng sighed internally. In the end, it was all because of him. If he had not been brought to Longkai Temple, the situation would have been different. However, he was not the sole cause of all this. He was also a victim. Zhang Qingsheng smiled and said, "Yes, eldest senior brother." Mangekyō stared at him with a burning gaze and said, "Third junior brother, you were able to kill the evil king 2 years ago. How powerful are you now? When will you spar with me?" Zhang Qingsheng did not want to dampen Mangekyō's spirits, so he declined. "Forget it. The evil king was careless back then. I'm not his opponent. Eldest senior brother, I'm tired. I'll go back and rest first. Let's practice swordsmanship when we're free." With that said, he turned around and walked towards his room. Mangekyō asked, "I heard that Li Qingking has already stepped into the peak. Third junior brother, do you want to go down the mountain and have an adventure? So soon? Could it be that he cultivated a demonic technique?" Zhang Qingsheng thought to himself. He waved his hand and said, "I don't want to go down the mountain. I just want to stay in Longkai Temple and stand aloof from worldly affairs." Mangekyō watched him enter the house before he turned to leave. Returning to his bed, Zhang Qingsheng frowned. What did Mangekyō mean? This guy also wanted to learn from Li Qingking? He thought for a moment and decided not to meddle in other people's business. Then, he closed his eyes and began to cultivate. The next morning, he came back after striking the Dao bell. King Ku was not in the house, so he took out the Kylan horsetail whisk from his mind. Previously, he was worried that he could not put the survival reward back after taking it out, so he did not take it out, but now was the right moment to take it out. During this period of time, he had completely mastered the Imperial Sword technique. Other than cultivating his Dao techniques and immortal skills, he had nothing else to do. Therefore, he might as well play with his magical weapons. The Kylan horsetail whisk appeared out of thin air in his hand. It looked no different from an ordinary horsetail whisk, but the handle was made out of white jade, similar to a white bone. He held the Kylan horsetail whisk and could sense the surging magic power inside. As expected of a magical weapon, it had its own spiritual power. A memory surfaced in his mind which told him how to make the magical weapon recognize its master. He began to imitate it and probed his divine consciousness into the Kylan horsetail whisk to break the restriction inside the magical weapon. An hour later, the Kylan horsetail whisk successfully recognized him as its master. After that, the Kylan horsetail whisk began to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth on its own. It was very magical. When Zhang Qingsheng injected spiritual energy into the Kylan horsetail whisk, the long whiskers on it could extend freely. Moreover, he could control them to bind someone up or just hit them. Wonderful. Zhang Qingsheng tried to put the Kylan horsetail whisk back into his mind, but he failed. Once the items for survival rewards were taken out, they could only exist in reality. Even though he felt somewhat regretful, he could still accept it. From then on, Zhang Qingsheng wore the Tai-Hang sword on his waist and held the Kylan horsetail whisk in his hand. He had the aura of a sage. When a disciple asked about the horsetail whisk, he said that it was a gift from Chen Li. All the disciples in the temple knew that Chen Li and the fourth prince would visit him occasionally. They were not the only ones. There were also other high-ranking officials and aristocrats who wanted to visit Zhang Qingsheng. At first, he met them, but after a few more times, he declined. That was because those people only wanted to see him and did not have Chen Li's sincerity. The summer sun was so hot that the air was slightly distorted. "Brother Qingsheng, I am going to the army. I will not be able to visit you for the next 5 years. I hope you can forgive me," the young man said in high spirits in front of Zhang Qingsheng. He put his hands on his hips and sweated profusely, but his energy was still high. Zhang Qingsheng had just finished guiding the divine shadow leg and was about to chase out the guest when he heard something unexpected coming out of the guest's mouth. Zhang Qingsheng asked, "Where are you joining the army?" "Not in the capital." The Great Jing dynasty had been founded for 16 years, and its interior was harmonious and peaceful. However, the war against the outside world had never stopped. The North had always been in a constant state of battles, and every year, a batch of outstanding generals would be born. Zhang Yu smiled and said, "In the North, of course. I want to flatten the desert and destroy ancient Han." The ancient Han dynasty was a dynasty in the north of the Great Jing dynasty. It had a vast territory and often invaded the surrounding dynasties. The Chu dynasty, the predecessor of the Great Jing dynasty, had been conquered by the ancient Han dynasty for a period of time and most of its territory had fallen. At that time, the royal family and citizens had suffered great humiliation, causing the people of the Great Jing dynasty to still have a bone-deep hatred for the ancient Han dynasty. Other than pursuing longevity, the current emperor's greatest goal was to flatten the ancient Han dynasty and achieve thousands of miraculous achievements. Zhang Qingsheng smiled and said, "It's not that easy for a prince to join the army. You have to think carefully." Zhang Yu grinned and said, "I have no choice. If I don't enter the army, I won't be able to win against my brother." Zhang Qingsheng was stunned. This was the first time Zhang Yu had revealed his ambition to him. The faction of the fake prince was getting stronger and stronger. It was said that he was in control of 2 of the 6 ministries, and he personally supervised the government offices in the capital. At the age of 16, he already had the ability to deal with government affairs. Many people were looking forward to what kind of prosperity he would bring to the world after he ascended the throne. As for the current emperor, the people had some criticisms about him. Repairing the canal was really a waste of money for the people. Zhang Qingsheng added, "Then I wish you success." Zhang Yu curiously asked, "If my brother or other princes came to rope you in these next few years, would you go down the mountain?" He seemed casual, but he was extremely nervous. Zhang Qingsheng shook his head and laughed. "Of course not. If I were here for fame and fortune, I would have listened to His Majesty and participated in the martial arts examination." Zhang Yu smiled and turned to leave. "Brother Qingsheng, wait for me to ride my horse back to the capital. I will spread your martial arts on the battlefield." The young man's laughter echoed in the building. At the age of 14, he was full of confidence and energy. Zhang Qingsheng looked at the pastries by his side with regret. He would not be able to eat such delicious pastries for a long time. The 4th prince's departure did not cause any waves in the capital. There were more than 10 princes and a crown prince among them. Thus, the 4th prince's presence was not high. After Zhang Qingsheng broke through to the 4th level of the Dao technique, he did not relax and worked hard every day. As the days passed, the leaves in Longkai Temple began to turn yellow, indicating that autumn was coming. Longkai Temple had returned to normal. High-ranking officials and nobles would come to burn incense and seek the Dao every few days. There were also swordsmen who came to stay and recuperate. Even though Zhang Qingsheng was the 3rd disciple, he did not usually receive guests. It was always the other disciples who were in charge. At present, the one in charge of Longkai Temple was his 2nd senior sister, Mangekyō Shuang. Mangekyō and Mangekyō Shuang were biological siblings. Their parents were killed by bandits when they were young. Fortunately, Priest King Su saved them and brought them up the mountain together. At noon, Zhang Qingsheng sat on the pagoda bell tower and faced the blazing sun. He circulated his energy and absorbed the weather between heaven and earth. King Ku suddenly ran downstairs and shouted, "Something bad has happened. Senior brother, eldest senior brother has run away." Zhang Qingsheng opened his eyes and stood up to look down at King Ku. "What do you mean? Do you mean senior brother Meng or senior brother Li?" "Senior brother Meng, of course. To be precise, another senior brother has escaped," King Ku said anxiously. Zhang Qingsheng frowned. He flipped over and leaped, landing lightly like a white crane. King Ku was already used to his movement technique and immediately led the way. The 2 of them quickly arrived at the front of the Enlightenment Hall. Most of the disciples had gathered there, and those who did not come were either responsible for guarding the mountain gate or entertaining the guests. In the hall, Taoist Master King Zhu had his back facing them. He was silent as he held a letter in his hand. Mangekyō Shuang gritted his teeth and said, "Master, I'll go and find him." Zhang Qingsheng was surprised. Mangekyō did not bring his sister down the mountain? Priest King Su sighed. "There's no need. Respect him. Kyo is different from Changking. He is not seeking refuge with the evil cult. He just wants to obtain more power. Perhaps you will see him again in the capital in the future." He turned around and looked at his disciples. When Zhang Qingsheng saw his calm expression, it seemed like he had already guessed it. Kai Shuang will be the 1st disciple. The other disciples will be promoted by 1 tier, Taoist Master King Zhu said. Just like this, Zhang Qingsheng had become the 2nd senior brother. He felt somewhat helpless. The speed of his promotion was too fast. Would he become the eldest senior brother in another 2 years? Qingshan, follow me. Taoist Master King Su waved his horsetail whisk and turned to leave. When Zhang Qingshan heard that, he hastily followed. The other disciples continued to discuss Mangekyō's departure. They passed through the Clear Heart Palace Hall and entered a long corridor. The commotion outside gradually faded away. Zhang Qingshan followed behind Taoist Master King Su as his imagination ran wild. He did not know what he wanted to say. Zhang Qingshan still wanted to know if Taoist Master King Su knew about his background and what he thought. Only then could he decide on revenge. He was not sure if anyone in the capital could defeat him, so he had to be careful. They arrived at a quiet courtyard. The courtyard was not big, and there was an old tree sitting there. The tree's body was winding like a dragon's body, and the dense autumn leaves fluttered with the wind. A yellow ring of leaves had already been piled up on the ground. Taoist Master King Su stopped and looked at the old tree. He slowly said, Qingshan, do you want to go down the mountain? Zhang Qingshan was stunned and hastily asked, Master, why do you want to dive me down the mountain? He did not expect Taoist Master King Su to have such thoughts. Taoist Master King Su calmly said, if you are unwilling to go down the mountain, are you willing to be the abbot of Longkai Temple in the future? Chapter 10 Great Noble, descendant of a demon beast. The abbot was the master of the Taoist temple. In the Great Jing dynasty, he could also be directly called a Taoist master. Become the abbot of Longkai Temple? Zhang Qingshan hesitated and did not answer immediately. It was impossible for him not to have thought about it. He believed that he was the strongest in Longkai Temple, and no one was more qualified than him. However, he did not expect to face this matter so soon. The Longkai Temple was not an aristocratic organization. There was no infighting, and the disciples had pure hearts and few desires. Naturally, there was no need for the Taoist master to test the disciples. Zhang Qingshan answered, of course I am willing to work for the Taoist temple. However, I am still young and I am afraid I can't take up the position. Eldest senior sister is more suitable than me. Besides, why did master ask this? You can continue as a Taoist master for many years. Taoist Master King Su raised his right hand and his sleeves fell, revealing his wrist that was covered with black blood vessels. It was as if black worms had crawled all over his skin and were still wriggling. It was a horrifying scene. Zhang Qingshan frowned. Taoist Master King Su calmly said, this poison is the evilest poison of the demonic sex. Even the aura of a true dragon cannot eliminate it. I will live for at most 5 years. I will give you another 5 years, and you have to be prepared to assume the responsibility of an abbot. As for your eldest senior sister, she is a woman with outstanding looks and is Q's biological sister. If she were to become an abbot, she would definitely bring about disaster. Zhang Qingshan felt that it made sense. Longkai Temple was located in the center of power of the Great Jing dynasty, and high-ranking officials and nobles often came to visit. A beautiful abbot would indeed cause a lot of trouble. 5 years. 5 years later, he would only be 21 years old. That was too early. Even though Zhang Qingshan did not refuse to be an abbot, he did not want to be too busy so early in his life. His main focus was on cultivation. Is there really no cure? Zhang Qingshan frowned and asked. Taoist Master King Su shook his head and laughed. Nothing is absolute. It's just that there's no antidote yet. Qingshan, you have to take it as a warning and avoid provoking the fiend sex. Be it good or bad, those who defy the heavens will always bring bad luck to the people around them. Zhang Qingshan continued to ask, why do you say that? What's the special background of the fiend's sex? Those who defied the natural order. Could it be a rebel? Taoist Master King Su shook his head and said no more. Zhang Qingshan hesitated for a moment before he continued to ask, Master, do you know my background? It seems like someone wants to kill me. The previous disaster. Don't think too much about it. It has nothing to do with you. It's just that someone wants to get rid of Longkai Temple, Taoist Master King Su interrupted. Zhang Qingshan frowned again. It was not easy for him to have the chance to ask, so he would not give up. Taoist Master King Su had a good relationship with Emperor Zhang Yuan, so he had to test him. Why does His Majesty take special care of me? I heard from Chen Li that he wanted to recommend me to participate in the martial arts examination just because I met him once. He even asked the fourth prince to find me to practice martial arts. The way His Majesty looked at me last time. Zhang Qingshan did not continue because Taoist Master King Su was staring at him intently. His gaze was exceptionally unfamiliar. He had never seen Taoist Master King Su reveal such an expression. In an instant, Zhang Qingshan was ready to fight. He dared to ask because his confidence came from his strength. If Taoist Master King Su were to save him, it would also be part of his conspiracy. At most, he would escape from the capital and come back when he was invincible. Taoist Master King Su faintly said, Qingshan, I don't know who you learned it from, but I believe there must be an expert guiding you behind the scenes. An expert that even I could not detect. His strength is unimaginable and I'm afraid he's a peerless expert above the spiritual sense realm. However, I advise you to be careful and not trust others easily. That's right, your background is indeed not simple. It's not worth your time to explore. It's dangerous and cruel. Zhang Qingsheng frowned when he heard that. He did not refute Taoist Master King Su. It was fine to fabricate a backer, but Taoist Master King Su's words made him think of more possibilities. Today, I will tell you the current realm of martial arts. From the lowest to the highest, it is divided into third-rate, second-rate, first-rate, true essence, and spiritual sense. Someone in the spiritual sense realm is regarded as a top expert in ordinary martial arts world, but that is not the case. There are higher realms above that, and as far as I know, there is the heavenly arrival realm. The current His Majesty does not seem to have any skills, but he has the luck of the Emperor. Once he unleashes the true dragon's aura, he is comparable to an expert in the spiritual sense realm. Most importantly, there is a heavenly arrival realm martial artist in the palace, and that person is the true pillar of the great Jing dynasty. Taoist Master King Su's tone was unfathomable, and no one could tell his emotions. Third-rate, second-rate, first-rate, true essence, spiritual sense, and heaven arrival. Zhang Qingsheng's frown deepened. The ghost-eyed evil king was an expert at the spiritual sense realm. Before he broke through to the fourth level of the Dao technique, he could easily kill the ghost-eyed evil king. This meant that at that time, he was at least invincible at the spiritual sense realm. Now, his strength had greatly improved and should be comparable to a heaven arrival realm expert. This was only his guess and he did not dare to gamble. He could only live for one lifetime and had no chance to reincarnate, so he had to be careful. Taoist Master King Su spoke again. Saving you has already brought about a huge disaster for the Lonkai Temple. I originally wanted to hide it, but since you have the intention to investigate, I can only tell you that there are only two paths for you to live. The first is for me to send you to the holy land of the martial arts world, but you will still not be able to escape the pursuit of your enemies. The second is for me to protect you for another 5 years. Within these 5 years, you have to grow as much as possible. After that, use the name of the Lonkai Temple to rope in your connections and fight against that great aristocrat. The existence of the Lonkai Temple was established by the Emperor when he founded the country and announced it to the world. Unless the Lonkai Temple commits treason, even His Majesty cannot uproot the Lonkai Temple. Great Jing, faith is the foundation of the country. From the Emperor to the common people, faith is the most important. All right, you may leave. Zhang Qingsheng did not ask further. He cupped his hands, bowed, and left. After he turned around, his expression turned cold. Ha. A great aristocrat. Zhang Qingsheng understood what Taoist Master King Su meant. At the same time, he felt fortunate and fearful. Fortunately, he was not trash when he met Zhang Yuan. In the quiet courtyard, Taoist Master King Su stared at the old tree in front of him. The mottled autumn leaves slowly fell onto the grass pile below without stirring up any dust. Alas, a family and a country in trouble. The day after he finished chatting with Taoist Master King Su, Zhang Qingsheng moved out and found a courtyard to stay in. As the second senior brother, he naturally had the qualifications. Mangekyō, who was in charge of power, did not even ask much and directly agreed. King Ku was reluctant, but Zhang Qingsheng agreed that he could visit him at any time in the future. Only then did he smile. The reason why Zhang Qingsheng stayed alone was because he did not want to be disturbed and wanted to just cultivate in peace. The heaven arrival state expert in the palace had become his imaginary enemy. He had to become as strong as possible. Regarding the poison that Taoist Master King Su had been inflicted with, he would also think of ways to try and detoxify it. After all, he had already mastered the spring and autumn medical manual, but he was still unable to detoxify the poison for the time being. He would have to wait for a year or two first. If he did not encounter any danger in the past 2 years, it meant that Taoist Master King Su was really good to him. Zhang Qingsheng's move did not cause any surprise among the disciples. Instead, they felt that it was only right for him to move out. Having the second senior brother living in their courtyard made them feel uneasy. After staying alone, Zhang Qingsheng did not even ring the bell and handed over the responsibility to other disciples. He was now the second senior brother, so other than Mangekyō, no one dared to reject his orders. In the blink of an eye, the heavy snow finally arrived, and the cold snow covered the capital. The righteous and the evil have gathered at Mount Yang, and a peerless war was about to begin. Unexpectedly, a person came out from Mount Yang and self-proclaimed to the called Emperor Yang Zhao. His strength was terrifying to the extreme. Even when the righteous and evil joined hands, he was knocked down the mountain alone and his name shook the world. Even though it's the martial arts world, how can you call yourself an emperor? When His Majesty learned of this, he was furious and ordered the silver-armored leopard light cavalry to encircle and suppress Huaiyang Mountain. 3,000 silver-armored leopard light cavalry were elites of the Great Jing dynasty, and there were more than 1,000 casualties. In the end, Emperor Yang Zhao even escaped. Right now, Emperor Yang Zhao's bounty is hanging in every corner of the world. Chen Li spoke rhythmically with a wine glass in his hand, as if he was a storyteller. Zhang Qingsheng listened with relish. In the new year, Chen Li aged faster than time. More and more gray hair appeared on his temples, and his eyes were filled with fatigue. Every time he came to Longkai Temple, other than bringing gifts, Chen Li would tell Zhang Qingsheng about the martial arts world and the court. Sometimes, he would also explain his frustration. After Zhang Qingsheng heard about the influential figures in the world, he asked curiously, "Is His Majesty still obsessed with alchemy?" When Chen Li heard that, he angrily said, "That's right, he's simply muddle-headed." Zhang Qingsheng was frightened. Even though he had outstanding senses and knew that there was no one outside the building, Chen Li's boldness was not a good thing. It was easy to attract a fatal disaster. He really did not want to live a wandering life. "Don't talk nonsense. Brother Chen, you have to pay more attention to your words and actions. Perhaps your predicament is related to your words and actions," Zhang Qingsheng said with sincerity. Chen Li immediately sobered up, but he was still furious. Chen Li gritted his teeth and said, "His Majesty places great importance on the demonic priest. Since the demonic priest is close to the second prince, he will sooner or later be in danger of seizing the throne." At that time, when Zhang Qingsheng heard that, he understood what was going on. The position of the fake prince was unstable. Could it be Zhang Yuan's idea that the demonic priest was close to the second prince? Chen Li raised his cup and gulped it down. He wiped his mouth and exhaled a long breath. "Qingsheng, I'll take my leave first. There's a snake egg in that small box. This snake egg was born from a demon snake and is extremely spiritual. If it can be nurtured and passed down for generations, it can become a mountain guardian spirit beast in the future." He got up, put on his raincoat, and left with his sword. Looking at his bent back, Zhang Qingsheng could not bear to see him like this and said, "Brother Chen, if you encounter any trouble, you can tell me. I will help if I can." Chen Li stopped at the door and chuckled. "Stinky brat, when I really need your help, my Chen family will definitely be at the end of its rope. At that time, I won't be stingy with my words. Cultivate well." He pushed the door open and gently closed it. Zhang Qingsheng was silent. It seemed like the vortex in the capital was getting more and more chaotic. The emperor was obsessed with the pursuit of longevity. In the history of China in his previous life, this symbolized was a bad start and might even usher in the collapse of a dynasty. The Great Jing dynasty could not be the Qin dynasty in another world, right? Zhang Qingsheng stood up and walked to the table. He lifted the cloth on the small box and opened it. Inside was a white egg larger than a goose egg. He reached out and touched it. It was scorching hot in the cold winter. He could even sense a faint strange energy inside. A descendant of a demon beast? Zhang Qingsheng was interested. It was not bad to raise pets. From his current understanding, even though there were demons in this world, there were very few of them. At the very least, they were not enough to overthrow the human dynasty. There were no immortals or gods in this world. As for the immortal cultivators, most of them were bewitching demons and swindlers. They were often forced out of their true forms by the martial artists. Chapter 11 Severing Karma, Overlord Body. Zhang Qingsheng carefully made a nest for the snake egg. It was placed on his bed, surrounded by bedding. Ever since he started cultivating, he had hardly slept. Late at night, he would sit quietly and absorb qi, replacing sleep. After dawn, he would be in high spirits. He began to look forward to the hatching of the snake egg. Every day, he would inject spiritual force into the egg to nourish the snake fetus. The peaceful days were broken half a month later. "I am Liu Luoyan. I heard that Taoist Master Qingsheng killed the evil ghost, the ghost-eyed evil king, and I am here to pay you a visit." A cold voice sounded from outside the house. Zhang Qingsheng opened his eyes. He had already sensed that the other party was coming towards his house, but since the other party could not threaten him, he did not care. Zhang Qingsheng's voice floated out, "May I know why Miss Liu is looking for me?" In the courtyard, there was a woman standing on the snow-covered ground. She wore a beautiful purple robe and looked like a swordsman. She held a sword in her hand. Even though she had a beautiful face, there was a nice cold-killing intent between her brows that kept people 1,000 miles away. Liu Luoyan said, "When I was young, the evil king massacred my entire family. I wandered around since I was young and learned martial arts. I originally wanted to take revenge on the evil king, but I heard that he was killed by Taoist Master Qingsheng. I would like to request for Taoist Master Qingsheng to enlighten me. Regardless of victory or defeat, this grudge will be resolved from now on. In the future, if Taoist Master requires my help, I will definitely help." Zhang Qingsheng was stunned and suspected that he had misheard. "What the heck? I helped you take revenge, And you came to me to compare notes? Zhang Qingsheng replied, I'm sorry, but I don't like to compare notes with others. I am a cultivator, and practicing martial arts is just my hobby. Please leave. As for favors, you don't have to thank me. Fortunately, he had killed the ghost-eyed evil king. Otherwise, this silly girl would definitely die if she were to find him. After all, there was still a gap between their true energy levels. Even though the gap was not huge, there was still an age gap between them, which meant a gap in experience. Thump. Liu Luoyan suddenly knelt on the snow and said expressionlessly, if Taoist Master does not agree, I will kneel here until I starve to death and die in your temple. As soon as she finished speaking, the courtyard fell into silence. Even the sound of the wind and snow had disappeared. Not far behind them, King Ku frowned when he saw this scene. Just as he was about to step forward to stop them, the door opened and Zhang Qingsheng in a blue Taoist robe walked out. Zhang Qingsheng, who was almost 17 years old, had grown up. He had a tall figure and a handsome face. He had the Tai-Hang sword on his waist and the Kylin horsetail whisk in his hand. Liu Luoyan subconsciously looked up and her gaze landed on Zhang Qingsheng. When she saw him, she could not help but be stunned. Their eyes met, and the snowstorm on the mountain seemed to have stopped. Zhang Qingsheng frowned and asked, Miss, why are you being unreasonable? It could be considered that I have helped you. Liu Luoyan retracted his gaze and blushed. She stood up and said, I know. It's not that I'm ungrateful. I'm definitely not your opponent. This matter has just bothered me. Even if Taoist Master hurt me, I won't have any complaints and I will repay you in the future. Zhang Qingsheng's frown deepened. Liu Luoyan drew his sword and waited for Zhang Qingsheng to take action. Zhang Qingsheng sighed and said, then attack. Give it your all so that you won't be dissatisfied in the future. When Liu Luoyan heard that, the corners of her mouth curled up. She immediately leaped up and quickly waved her sword with her right hand. Streaks of sword chi that were visible to the naked eye rushed towards Zhang Qingsheng and tore through the wind and snow. At that moment, Liu Luoyan suddenly felt everything slow down. She looked at Zhang Qingsheng as he lifted his leg. His movements were not fast, but it gave her an unstoppable momentum. Zhang Qingsheng raised his left leg and kicked. Dozens of leg shadows dispersed the sword chi in midair and hit Liu Luoyan. PFFT Liu Luoyan vomited blood and flew backward before she fell heavily into a pile of snow. She covered her chest in pain and wanted to stand up, but she spat out another mouthful of blood and fainted. King Ku was so frightened that he immediately ran over and asked in a trembling voice, Senior brother, she. Zhang Qingsheng slowly retracted his leg and shook his head with a smile. She's not dead. Take her away. Killing people in the capital was illegal unless the other party was a death row prisoner like the ghost-eyed evil king or in self-defense. King Ku breathed a sigh of relief. Just as he crouched down, he stood up and said, this won't do. I'll call senior sister. With that said, he ran out. Zhang Qingsheng turned around and returned to his room, leaving Liu Luoyan in the snow. Not long after, eldest senior sister Mangekyō Wang and King Ku came with several disciples to take Liu Luoyan away. The news quickly spread and the disciples had a deeper understanding of Zhang Qingsheng. This senior brother had become fierce after living alone. Zhang Qingsheng did not severely injure Liu Luoyan. He merely shook her true energy and did not injure her internal organs. She would recover in a few days. The reason why he did this was because he was afraid that Liu Luoyan would pester him, so he just broke her stubbornness in one go. 3 days later, Liu Luoyan left the mountain and did not look for Zhang Qingsheng again. In the 17th year after the founding of the dynasty, a woman from the martial arts world, Liu Luoyan, came to you for a spar due to hatred. You crushed her thoughts and passed through a causal event. You received a survival reward, the martial arts, Zhuan Overlord body. Was this considered an ordeal? It seemed like if he had not been so ruthless, wouldn't I have more to do with her? Zhang Qingsheng imagined many possibilities, but he did not regret it at all. There were many women in the world, and he could not be distracted on the path of cultivation. 100 years later, the other party would be nothing but dirt, so there was no need to worry. This life is destined to be lonely. Zhang Qingsheng sighed and happily inherited the Overlord body. The Zhuan Overlord body was considered an internal martial art. It used true chi to temper the body, making it as tough as iron. Once successful, his body would be hard to pierce through with a sword and would be immune to poison. It sounded very awesome. Zhang Qingsheng intended to spend 4 hours a day cultivating it. After he broke through to the 4th level of the Dao technique, he entered a period of slow growth. He was far from breaking through to the 5th level. However, he was still young and could take his time. His spiritual force could be described as boundless. Compared to him, Taoist Master King Su's true energy was like a small stream compared to an ocean. The light of a grain of rice competed with the bright moon. However, she did not know if she was stronger or weaker than at heaven, a rival realm expert in the palace. The winter snow melted and the spring of the 17th year of the founding era arrived. Zhang Qingshan quietly celebrated his 17th birthday. A 17-year-old was already considered an adult in the Jing dynasty. 20 years ago, there were many 16 to 17-year-old teenagers on the battlefield. In the courtyard, Zhang Qingshan sat on the water vat. Looking carefully, his legs and buttocks were 3 to 4 centimeters away from the water. He was floating in the air, but looking from afar, he looked to be sitting on the water. His Taoist robe fluttered incessantly, and visible heat overflowed from his pores, revealing skin that jumped like fried beans. It was rather horrifying. He suddenly stood up and landed beside the water vat. His skin quickly recovered and his Taoist robe was dried up. After dozens of breaths, the wooden door in the courtyard was pushed open and King Ku walked in with an excited expression. After so many years, King Ku had put aside his experience of roaming the martial arts world. He was no longer as reticent as before, and he had regained the liveliness of his youth. Ever since he learned the 9 seeking heavenly dragon steps, his martial arts skills had improved by leaps and bounds. Even if he was not outstanding among his fellow disciples, it was not a problem for him to be ranked in the top 10. Of course, the martial arts of the entire Lonkai Temple were poor. Most of them only knew basic martial arts. Taoist Master King Su's true energy was equivalent to the true energy realm expert, but he might be able to display the strength of the spiritual sense realm expert. As for senior sister Mangekyō Wang, she was just a first-rate expert. It was not too strong, but fortunately, the temple was located in the capital where there was not much competition in the martial arts world. Senior brother, good news. Senior brother Q has become the top scholar in the martial arts examination and is in laws with a third-ranked official in the royal court. He is extremely glorious. Eldest senior sister is preparing to bring several disciples to pay him a visit. Are you coming? King Ku said excitedly. He still respected Mangekyō. Even though Mangekyō had betrayed Lonkai Temple, he had always stayed in the capital. Every time a disciple came down the mountain and met him, he would treat them to a meal as if they were still fellow disciples. Zhang Qingshan shook his head and smiled. I won't be going. You go ahead. King Ku said, if we go, we can eat delicious food. There will also meat dishes. Even though Lonkai Temple did not abstain from eating meat, there were only vegetables and fruits on the mountain. Moreover, they did not have any money, so it was hard for them to eat meat when they went down the mountain. Therefore, when they heard that they were going to visit Mangekyō, they were very excited and fought to go. Zhang Qingshan still refused, so King Ku could only give up. He was also afraid of wasting time and not being able to freeload on delicacies. How did he become the top martial arts scholar? Zhang Qingshan looked at King Ku's back and thought to himself. He knew Mangekyō's skills in martial arts. In his eyes, Mangekyō was only average. How long had it been since he left the mountain? Chen Li had mentioned that almost all the martial arts top scholars were contested by experts in the martial arts world. There had even been a peerless expert who had obtained the title of martial arts top scholar before and directly joined the army to become a general. His achievements had attracted more martial arts experts to participate in the martial arts examination. Something was amiss. Zhang Qingshan shook his head and continued to cultivate, striving to perfect the overlord body as soon as possible. Night fell. Zhang Qingshan returned to the house. He was observing the snake egg. When would this little guy come out? In the 17th year of the founding of the dynasty, your former senior brother, Mangekyō, set up a trap to scheme against you. However, you did not go and avoided a calamity. You received a survival reward, the magic spell, Rejuvenation. When Zhang Qingshan saw this line of words, he could not help but frown. Mangekyō had defected? No wonder he could become the martial arts top scholar. Even though he was indignant, he was more excited. Another spell. This was more like it. How could an immortal cultivator continue to train in martial arts? In fact, it was good to have more tribulations like this. It could make him stronger. Zhang Qingshan immediately accepted the rejuvenation spell and memories surged into his mind. Rejuvenation was a healing spell. If a person had just died, it could help them keep their breath and live for a period of time. Normally, rejuvenation could only heal wounds and speed up the coagulation of blood. Keep one's breath. This was a divine technique. Zhang Qingshan felt that he could solve the case. That night, Zhang Qingshan was cultivating the art of rejuvenation. King Ku did not come to him again. Mangekyō only wanted to scheme against him, so he naturally did not make things difficult for his biological sister and other disciples. A month later, Zhang Qingshan had completely mastered the rejuvenation spell, but his overlord body had yet to be completed. He still needed time. The snake egg had yet to hatch. If not for the fact that he could sense the vitality inside, Zhang Qingshan would have thrown it away or fried an egg to eat. On this day, Zhang Qingshan was cultivating when King Ku came to visit with an angry expression. Senior brother Qingshan, someone provoked Lonkai Temple, and none of the disciples were his opponent. The other party said that Lonkai Temple is not worthy of being the only martial arts sect in the capital and that they wanted to replace us. King Ku was furious. He clenched his fist and his veins bulged. Zhang Qingsheng frowned and asked, "There's someone in the capital who dares to provoke Lonkai Temple?" King Ku gritted his teeth and said, "The other party is the demonic priest, who is highly regarded by His Majesty. He wants to open a Taoist temple in the capital, but there is only one mountain in the city, Lonkai Mountain." Chapter 12 Sword Control Magic. Phantom God Eye Demonic Priest wanted to open a Taoist temple? Zhang Qingsheng's expression turned cold. He felt that someone was pushing him from behind, so he immediately followed King Ku. At the same time, under the mountain gate, the disciples of both sides were confronting each other. Taoist Master King Xu, Mangekyō Wang, and a group of disciples stood in front of a small bridge. There was also a group of Taoist priests outside the gate. The leader was a middle-aged Taoist priest with a thin body and a crafty expression. He had his right hand behind his waist and his left hand pinching his goatee as he stared at the Taoist priests of Lonkai Temple with arrogance. The middle-aged priest was the demonic priest, who was favored by the emperor. He called himself Old Immortal Huanyang, and he had dozens of disciples under him. Most of them were children of nobles from the capital. There was also a young man by his side. He looked to be 16 to 17 years old and was dressed in purple clothes. He was exquisitely dressed and wore a jade crown embedded with pearls. He had a handsome appearance and with a single glance, one could tell that he had an extraordinary background. Taoist Master King Xu expressionlessly said, "Fellow Taoist, are you really going to force Lonkai Temple to their death?" Behind him, 4 disciples were supported by other disciples. These 4 disciples were all injured as they stared at the middle-aged priest in shock and anger. Old Immortal Huanyang smiled and said, "Why do I have to force them to their deaths? Fellow Taoist King Xu, just give up this mountain. The disciples under you are too weak. I suspect that fellow Taoist did not teach them seriously. Since you do not have the heart to impart martial arts, why do you have to occupy the mountain?" As soon as he said that, his disciples clamored one after another, each saying more unpleasant words than the other. Lonkai Temple should have been uprooted a long time ago. It's just that His Majesty cares about his old friendship. That's right. Lonkai Temple has contributed nothing to the court. Even the newly appointed top scholar has abandoned Lonkai Temple. In my opinion, they are all a group of good-for-nothings without any ability. Even His Majesty rarely comes. It would be better for you, Master, to give up his position and let the real immortal Master teach. According to the rules of the martial arts world, if you are no match for us, you should give up unless Lonkai Temple does not reside in a martial arts sect. It's not that His Majesty has gone back on her words, but Lonkai Temple is too useless. You should just excuse yourself and get out. In the face of the clamor, the disciples of Lonkai Temple were furious. They retaliated and both sides started to bicker. Old Immortal Huanyang raised his hand and the disciples behind him immediately shut their mouths. Seeing this, Mangekyō Wang also told his junior brothers and sisters to stop. If they continued to curse, it would tarnish the image of the Lonkai Temple. Old Immortal Huanyang chuckled and said, "Fellow Taoist, do you want to take action? If you can defeat me, I will immediately leave the mountain. However, if you lose, forget about the rules of the pugilistic world." Taoist Master King Xu sighed. Just as he was about to speak, a voice sounded. "I wonder what will happen if someone dies in the spar?" The disciples turned to look. When they saw who it was, their expressions brightened and excitement surfaced on their faces. Senior Sister Mangekyō Wang also revealed a smile. Zhang Qingsheng slowly walked over. Behind him, King Ku took advantage of the tiger's might and glared at Old Immortal Huanyang. Old Immortal Huanyang stared at Zhang Qingsheng and asked with a smile, "Are you the Taoist master who killed the ghost-eyed evil king at the age of 14? Your killing intent is really heavy." The purple-clad young man looked at Zhang Qingsheng with a teasing expression. No one knew what he was thinking. Zhang Qingsheng pressed his right hand on the hilt of the Tai-Hang sword and held the Kylan horsetail whisk in his left hand. He chuckled and said, "The rules of the martial arts world are to compare notes. Life and death are up to fate, right?" Old Immortal Huanyang's true energy was only slightly stronger than the ghost-eyed evil king. If the two of them were to fight to the death, the ghost-eyed evil king might not lose. However, ever since Taoist Master King Xu was poisoned, his vital energy had been dissipating and he was no longer the opponent of Elder Huanyang. Old Immortal Huanyang could not see through Zhang Qingsheng's strength. He even felt that Zhang Qingsheng was an ordinary person, but his achievements in killing the ghost-eyed evil king were obvious. Just as Old Immortal Huanyang hesitated, his disciples began to encourage him. These disciples were all good-for-nothings. Other than blind worship, some of them were arranged by their elders in their families. Therefore, they did not care about his life or death. Zhang Qingsheng stared at Elder Huanyang teasingly and was not anxious at all. Now, it was old Immortal Huanyang's turn to be in a dilemma. Old Immortal Huanyang seemed arrogant and conceited, but he was actually very cautious. Otherwise, he would not have become the Emperor's favorite. Since you don't dare, then get lost. King Ku could not help but curse, and the other disciples followed suit. They were full of confidence in Zhang Qingshan. After all, they had witnessed the insufferably arrogant evil king being kicked to death by Zhang Qingshan, and it was still fresh in their minds. Old Immortal Huanyang revealed a smile and said, "The capital is an important place. How can we discuss life and death? If I were to kill you, it would not be easy. Forget it, come again next time." With that said, he raised his hand and prepared to call for his disciples to retreat. Zhang Qingshan released the hilt of his sword with his right hand and sneered. "Do you think you can come and leave the Longkai temple just as you like?" As soon as he finished speaking, the Tai-Hang sword suddenly unsheathed. The light of the sword dazzled, causing everyone to subconsciously close their eyes. The same went for old Immortal Huanyang. He also felt a sharp pain and opened his eyes in fright. The others only heard the sound of the blade penetrating flesh. They opened their eyes and saw Elder Huanyang half kneeling on the ground. Zhang Qingshan was still standing on the spot as if he had not attacked, but the Tai-Hang sword on his waist had disappeared. The disciples of Longkai Temple were all dumbstruck and revealed expressions of disbelief. Even Taoist Master King Su was moved. The sound of air being torn apart could be heard. The Tai-Hang sword flew past the head of old Immortal Huanyang, cut off a strand of long hair, and flew into the scabbard on Zhang Qingshan's waist. The Longkai Temple was silent. Everyone was stunned. Even the purple-clad young man was moved as he looked at Zhang Qingshan in a daze. What kind of martial arts was that? Old Immortal Huanyang widened his eyes and stared at Zhang Qingshan. His eyes were bloodshot and cold sweat the size of bins overflowed from his forehead. Just now, he felt the aura of death. This feeling reminded him of the chaotic times before the Jing dynasty was founded. There was once a thief who wanted to behead him. At that time, the blade was not far from the back of his neck and that chill was exactly the same as now. Zhang Qingshan said expressionlessly, "Don't come near here in the future." The Tai-Hang sword pierced through old Immortal Huanyang's shoulder and cut off some of his meridians, causing his true energy to dissipate. For this injury, it would take him a year and a half to recover. Old Immortal Huanyang gritted his teeth and said, "Help me away." In the face of the terrifying Zhang Qingshan, he did not even dare to utter a single harsh word. The disciples hastily supported him down the mountain. All of them were in an extremely sorry state and were frightened out of their wits by Zhang Qingshan's sword control technique. Zhang Qingshan glanced at the young man in purple. There were 4 guards behind him, and it was obvious that his identity was not simple. His sharp gaze woke the latter up. "How dare you? Don't be rude to His Second Highness." One of the guards shouted angrily, but his voice was trembling. Zhang Qingshan's sword control technique shattered his understanding. Could martial arts be like this? When Zhang Qingshan heard that, he cupped his fists at the purple-clad young man and said, "Your Second Highness, do you want to be a guest?" The prince who competed with the fake prince for power. Zhang Qingshan had heard from the 4th prince, Zhang Yu, that the 2nd prince, Zhang Ming, was younger than the crown prince by half a year. His mother was the younger sister of Hong Lai, the #1 general in the Great Jing. After Cao Hubao rebelled, Hong Lai became the commander-in-chief of the 3 armies, and his status was comparable to a second-ranked official. It could even be said that he was second only to one person and above tens of thousands of people. Naturally, Hong Lai supported the 2nd prince. Therefore, the 2nd prince's faction was also very powerful and was not inferior to the crown prince at all. It was uncertain who would inherit the throne in the future. Zhang Ming stared at Zhang Qingshan with a burning gaze and said, "Taoist Master Qingshan, you're really amazing. The sword technique just now was really magical. Even though I've never roamed the world, I can still see the power of Taoist Master Qingshan. I want to invite Taoist Master Qingshan to be my guest. In the future, I'll fight for an official position for you and enjoy a great salary. As long as I'm here, I guarantee that Taoist Master Qingshan will have nothing to worry about in his life. I'll try my best to satisfy whatever you want." The moment he said that, the disciples of Longkai Temple looked at Zhang Qingshan enviously. Previously, the 4th prince had came to acknowledge him as his teacher. Now, the 2nd prince was also here. The 4th prince could not be compared to the 2nd prince. Zhang Qingshan smiled and said, "Thank you for your praise, Your Highness. I only wish to comprehend the Tao here. My greatest pursuit is my Taoist name. The wealth and status of the secular world have nothing to do with me." Zhang Ming stepped forward and warmly held Zhang Qingshan's hand as he started to say all sorts of beautiful words. His words sounded like flattery, but his identity was not low, so the effect of his words was different. Zhang Qingshan's polite response did not embarrass the 2nd prince. Last year's top scholar had submitted to Zhang Ming. Jiang Ming did not lack civil servants and generals, but he lacked experts like Jiang Qingshan. No matter how much he said, Jiang Qingshan still refused. Jiang Ming felt regretful, but he was not angry. Instead, he instructed his subordinates, "From today onwards, Longkai Temple's Taoist Master Qingshan is my friend. Go back and tell old immortal Huan Yang that he is not allowed to cause trouble again. Also, tell the entire capital that whoever dares to provoke Taoist Master Qingshan is not giving me face." "Yes." The 4 guards immediately agreed. Jiang Ming smiled at Jiang Qingshan and turned to leave. After the 5 of them left, the disciples of Longkai Temple immediately surrounded him, all of them extremely excited. Taoist Master Kingsu did not say anything else and turned to leave. Mangekyō Shuang walked to Jiang Qingshan and said, "Junior brother Qingshan, you have saved the Taoist temple again." Jiang Qingshan smiled and said, "Senior sister, what are you talking about? I am also a member of Longkai Temple. Compared to your usual busy schedule, I am nothing." Mangekyō Shuang revealed an approving smile as she lamented in her heart. The child from back then had already propped up the Longkai Temple by himself. Time passed really quickly. After dealing with his fellow disciples, Jiang Qingshan quickly returned to his room. In the 17th year of the founding of the dynasty, the demonic priest, old immortal Huan Yang, invaded. You repelled him and survived a calamity. You received a survival reward, the spell, Phantom God's Eye. Jiang Qingshan looked at the notification and was in a good mood. It was also a good thing for someone to find fault with him, as it could make him stronger. As his spiritual force increased and the gap between him and the martial artists increased, the pressure he felt was far less than before. Even if the army surrounded Longkai Temple tomorrow, he was not afraid. As long as he used the sword control technique, who in the entire capital could stop him? After inheriting the memories of the Phantom God's Eye, Jiang Qingshan marveled at how terrifying it was. After cultivating the Phantom God's Eye, one could change the memories of others as long as they looked into their eyes. This process would consume spiritual force according to the amount of information tampered with. The other party must also have a cultivation level lower than his. Otherwise, it would be easy to see through and it would also cause a backlash to the caster. A godly skill. However, he would only know the practical effect after cultivating it. Jiang Qingshan became excited and began to cultivate the Phantom God Eye. In the following month, Jiang Ming sent someone 5 times, and every time, he would bring generous gifts. There were grains, medicinal ingredients, books, jade, and so on. This news also spread throughout the capital. Jiang Qingshan knew what Jiang Ming meant. He had no choice but to board the ship. Unfortunately, he had underestimated Jiang Qingshan. Jiang Qingshan naturally accepted these generous gifts and then gave them to the Taoist temple. More than half a month after the 5th gift, Jiang Qingshan received shocking news. Jiang Ming was assassinated and was severely injured. Chapter 13 The Emperor's Plot, Birth of the White Dragon. The assassin must be a top expert to have snuck into the palace to assassinate the second prince and even escaped in the end. His Majesty was furious and searched the entire city for the assassin. Chen Li lamented. He did not have a favorable impression of the second prince, but he was not disgusted with him. He was only amazed by the strength of that martial arts expert. Jiang Qingshan frowned. Wasn't there a heaven or rival realm expert in the palace? How could the assassin succeed? That was too much. Could it be the work of those nobles? However, would the emperor allow those people to attack his other son? Jiang Qingshan asked, "Is His Second Highness alright?" Chen Li said, "It's said to be a serious injury, so it shouldn't be life-threatening. Otherwise, General Hong would go crazy. His Second Highness' mother is not a kind person." Jiang Qingshan suddenly could not understand the emperor. After he conversed with Taoist Master Kingsu the last time, he guessed that it was very likely that he was switched by the emperor. Other than the emperor, was there anyone else who was more influential? If it was the emperor's doing, then it would be easy to explain. There were as many experts in the palace as there were clouds, and it was extremely difficult to bring him out. If the emperor turned a blind eye, then it would make sense. However, the emperor allowed those people to attack his other son. What did that mean? He insisted on killing his son. Could it be that he, the emperor, was the one who was replaced? Even until now, Jiang Qingshan could not understand why the emperor wanted someone to swap him. "I heard that you injured the demonic priest and did a good job." After the demonic priest was injured, His Majesty rarely saw him again. However, recently, His Majesty has gone to court 4 to 5 times a month, and I don't know what he is doing in the palace. Now that His Second Highness is injured, the hearts of the people in the court are wavering. The Prime Minister actually took the opportunity to ask the Crown Prince to supervise the country. This is ridiculous. If there is a gap between father and son in the future, won't the country be in turmoil? When Chen Li mentioned the matters in the court, he was filled with righteous indignation and did not care about the emperor and the Crown Prince at all. Zhang Qingsheng asked, has His Majesty agreed? Chen Li said, I'm not sure. His Majesty did not go to court that day. After the lords of the three provinces told His Majesty about the matter, there was no more news. The Great Jing dynasty implemented a system of 3 provinces and 6 ministries. It was very similar to some dynasties in China, but there were also some differences. The 3 provinces were respectively Zhongshu Province, Zhoxiao Province and Shangshu Province. Their status was higher than the 6 ministries, and they were all second-ranked officials that faced the emperor. The prime minister was the head of the 3 provinces, on the same level as the 3 provinces, but his power was higher than the important officials of the 3 provinces. Zhang Qingsheng asked curiously, Brother Chen, what about you? Which prince do you support? How could he not take sides when he was an official? Chen Li said, naturally, I respect the crown prince. Since ancient times, the eldest son of the first wife has been the leader of the righteous path. However, the crown prince took power in advance and the danger outweighed the benefits. Holy smokes. FCK, you're actually a princeling. Zhang Qingsheng was speechless. However, Chen Li should not be his enemy. Otherwise, he would not have said so many disrespectful words. Speaking of which, His Majesty's attitude towards His Highness the Crown Prince is sometimes good and sometimes bad. In recent years, he has even started to neglect the Empress. Perhaps His Majesty has begun to fear the Empress faction. Chen Li sighed. Zhang Qingsheng asked, is the Empress faction very strong? It was hard for him to understand what had happened in the palace when he was in the Taoist temple, and Taoist Master King Su would not say much about it. Chen Li sighed and said, it's more than just strong. It can shake the foundation of the country. The leader of the Imperial Guard stationed in the capital is the Empress's brother, and 2 of the 3 lords of the provinces are the Empress's younger brothers. When His Majesty started the rebellion back then, he relied on the Yang family. When His Majesty married the Empress, the Yang family supported him with all their might. That was why he had the money to recruit troops and buy horses. At that time, the Yang family was a huge family that used all their wealth to support His Majesty. Men served His Majesty as soldiers and generals while talented people served as strategists. Regardless of whether His Majesty won or lost, the Yang family had always followed him. They were His Majesty's most trusted force until they helped him build this huge empire. Zhang Qingsheng was suddenly enlightened. He suddenly understood why the emperor had switched him. He also felt a trace of sympathy for the fake prince. This guy was destined for tragedy. If the emperor were to swap him and reveal that the fake crown prince was not his biological son one day, wouldn't he be able to abolish the crown prince? Even though the Yang family was furious, they could not find the real crown prince. If they allowed the other princes to ascend the throne, the Yang family would be gradually weakened. However, the Yang family still had another trump card, and that was the 4th prince, Zhang Yu. Wait a minute. As for Zhang Yu, Zhang Qingsheng's heart turned cold. Even a vicious tiger would not eat its cubs, but his father was really ruthless. Great Jing regarded faith as the foundation of the country. The emperor had promised to conquer the country and share the world with the Yang family. Naturally, he could not directly destroy the Yang family. He needed methods and reasons. All the important officials who had fallen from grace over the years had been charged with rebellion, bullying the common people, and so on. Precisely because of this, the emperor had yet to lose his faith. It was those officials who courted death. Chen Li chatted with Zhang Qingsheng for another incense stick of time. After he left, Zhang Qingsheng was still in the room thinking about something. There was no familial love in the royal family. It turned out that it was not empty talk. Zhang Qingsheng sighed with emotion. He was not interested in becoming an emperor. Even if he were to become emperor, he did not know how to manage a dynasty. However, he was still unhappy to be schemed against like this, even by his father. As usual, he was not a gentleman if he did not take revenge. Zhang Qingsheng's eyes flickered as he gradually had a bold idea. In the palace, in the 2nd prince's bedroom, Zhang Yuan, whose hair was half white, sat by the bed and looked at Zhang Ming with heartache. Zhang Ming had woken up, but his face was pale and his lips were dry and cracked. Compared to the high-spirited Zhang Ming at Longkai Temple that day, he was a completely different person. Tomorrow, don't go out in the future. Even though the world has been decided, the remnants of the previous dynasty are still here. Do you understand? Zhang Yuan patted the back of Zhang Ming's hand and sighed worriedly. Zhang Ming gritted his teeth and said, but I wasn't assassinated outside the palace. Zhang Yuan glared at him and shouted in a deep voice, aren't your actions in Longkai Temple impressive enough? I don't even dare to protect a single person. As a prince, you dare to protect a single person. Won't others think that you are arrogant? You even spread the word to the entire capital. Ridiculous. Hearing this, Zhang Ming broke out in cold sweat. Behind Zhang Yuan was the crown prince, Zhang Qian. He had a refined temperament, similar to a scholar. He did not have the spirit of Zhang Yu and Zhang Ming. Zhang Qian said, "Father, second brother is just a quick talker. He has no other intentions. Besides, he is injured. Why do you have to scare him?" Zhang Ming looked at him gratefully. Zhang Yuan glanced at Zhang Qian and snorted. "You only know how to indulge your younger brothers." Zhang Qian smiled and said nothing else. The old eunuch behind Zhang Qian was Eunuch Li, who had followed Zhang Yuan around all year round. He was also the one who sent Zhang Qingsheng out of the palace. Eunuch Li bowed and said, "Your Majesty, the time has come. It's time to ask the heavens." When Zhang Yuan heard that, he flung his sleeves and stood up with his hands on his hips. He smiled and said, "Rest well and recuperate. The canal will begin to take shape in the coming year. I will bring the two of you down to Jiangnan. You have never left the capital since you were young? I will show you the great country I have conquered." With that said, Zhang Yuan flicked his sleeves and left with a majestic gait. Eunuch Li hastily followed. Zhang Qian shook his head and laughed. He looked at Zhang Ming on the bed and said, "Second brother, recuperate well. I have to go now." Just as he turned around, Zhang Ming's voice floated over and stopped him. "Brother, do you think someone in the palace wants me dead?" His tone was thought-provoking as he stared upward without looking at Zhang Qian. Zhang Qian turned his head slightly and said to Zhang Ming, "Second brother, stop reading history books. Our Zhang family is a family of true dragons. How can we kill each other? I will personally investigate. I will not allow such a thing to happen." With that said, he stepped out of the room. Zhang Ming revealed a mocking smile and slowly closed his eyes. After the second prince was injured, he did not send anyone else to send gifts. Zhang Qingsheng was also happy to be free and could concentrate on his cultivation. A month later, the snake egg finally hatched. A small white snake appeared. It was thinner than Zhang Qingsheng's pinky and was nearly 10 centimeters long. The newborn snake was no different from ordinary snakes. Thus, Zhang Qingsheng had no choice but to take care of it personally. He was as careful as he could when feeding it, fearing that he would choke it to death. For the rest of the year, Zhang Qingsheng did not encounter any more danger. The second prince did not come to visit him, and the nobles who were his enemies did not send anyone to assassinate him. The 18th year after the founding of the dynasty. In the year, the emperor took the crown prince and the second prince into the canal and went down to the Jiangnan area. The canal ran from the north to the south and was still under construction, but it was more than halfway completed and could be operated by ship. The emperor's departure from the capital was a major event, and the disciples of Longkai Temple had also learned of it. Zhang Qingsheng had also heard from King Ku that the emperor had left the capital for the first time since he established his own country. Zhang Qingsheng did not mind. If the emperor was not in the capital, those aristocrats would come and give him a survival reward. He spent most of his time on his cultivation and his spiritual force was boundless. Compared to him, it was already a compliment to say that top experts had 1 in 1,000th of his strength. On this day, in the courtyard, Zhang Qingsheng sat on the threshold with 2 children standing in front of him. They were both 6 years old, a man and a woman. Their Taoist robes draped over them made them look loose, but it also made them look even more adorable. Upon closer inspection, the 2 child Taoists were motionless, and their pupils were suffused with a faint golden light. It was extremely strange. On the other hand, Zhang Qingsheng's eyes were also golden, dazzling even in broad daylight. He was using the phantom god eyes to tamper with the memories of the 2 children. All of a sudden, he closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his pupils returned to normal and the 2 children woke up with a start. The little girl asked, "Senior brother Qingsheng, why did you stop?" These were the memories that Zhang Qingsheng had changed for them, making them mistakenly think that they were listening to the Tao. In fact, they had just arrived and Zhang Qingsheng had yet to preach. The male child scratched his head, also confused. Zhang Qingsheng smiled and said, "It's nothing. Let's call it a day. Come back tomorrow and I'll teach you some martial arts." When the 2 heard that, they immediately cheered and left. After they left the courtyard, Zhang Qingsheng breathed a sigh of relief. He felt dizzy after altering the memories of the 2 children for nearly 5 minutes. The side effects of the phantom god's eye were really strong. Zhang Qingsheng was not disappointed. Instead, he was excited. As long as he was strong enough, could he directly change a person's memory of the first half of their life and reverse their personality? Too domineering. A white snake emerged from the back of Zhang Qingsheng's neck and flicked its tongue at his cheek, appearing extremely close. After half a year, the white snake was almost half a meter long. It had a gentle personality and was intellectable. Zhang Qingsheng named it the White Dragon, looking forward to the day it could transform into a dragon. That evening, Chen Li came to visit. "Qingsheng, you have to be careful. His Majesty has left the capital, and there are undercurrents in the capital. My Chen family's martial arts experts heard that the fiend sects are preparing to enter the capital, and it's very likely that they want to avenge the ghost-eyed evil king. Chen Li's tone was serious, and his face was filled with worry. Chapter 14 I am the crown prince. Why can't I fight for the throne? The demonic sects had entered the capital? Zhang Qingsheng was not worried. Instead, he asked, how powerful is the ghost-eyed evil king in the fiend sects? Chen Li answered, other than the sect master, there are 2 vice sect masters in the demonic sect. Below them are the 7 evil kings and 18 envoys. The ghost-eyed evil king is at least one of the top 5 existences in their sect. When he attacked Longkai Temple, he was imprisoned and his injuries were severe. In fact, his strength was not even half of his peak. Even experts in the martial arts world could not withstand the methods of the prison. He was considered in the top 5? Zhang Qingsheng began to look forward to the attack of the demonic sect. Of course, he would not let his guard down in the face of the experts from the demonic sect. He had to give it his all. He could not develop a mentality of slacking off. He had to kill any enemy as soon as possible. Zhang Qingsheng warned himself in his heart and his eyes became firm. When Chen Li saw the change in his expression, he thought that he was afraid and said, if you're worried, you can stay in my Chen family for the time being. No matter how powerful the demonic sect is, they will not dare to attack a minister's mansion. Zhang Qingsheng shook his head and said, thank you for your kind intentions. For the sake of Longkai Temple, I have to stay. Don't worry. Chen Li stroked his beard and said with a smile, that's true. You were able to kill the ghost-eyed evil king 4 years ago. How strong are you now? TSK, I can't imagine. Zhang Qingsheng responded humbly, and Chen Li began to talk about other topics. First of all, there was a young prodigy in the martial arts world at the beginning of the year. At the age of 16, he had mastered a divine technique and stepped into the peak. Right now, he had become the leader of a sect, and it had been renamed as the Gyuan Divine Sect. The great Jing dynasty valued martial arts. Naturally, such a young talent would be favored by the aristocrats in the royal court. It was said that more than 10 clans had sent people to rope in the sect master of the Gyuan Divine Sect. Chen Li said with contempt, in my opinion, you are the real prodigy. Qingsheng, any prodigy pales in comparison to you. Zhang Qingsheng shook his head and laughed. I don't want to be a prodigy. I just want to experience peace and quiet on the mountain. Peace and quiet. What a good way to live. Ever since Zhang Qingsheng had a horsetail whisk in his hands, he felt that this kid had become more and more otherworldly. In fact, he was even more sage-like than Taoist Master King Su. If there were young immortals in the world, he would be the example. As they chatted, Chen Li began to talk nonsense about the state affairs again and ridiculed the emperor crazily. Zhang Qingsheng even suspected that he wanted to rebel. Even though Zhang Yuan had mistreated Zhang Qingsheng, the world belonged to the Zhang family. Naturally, Zhang Qingsheng would not help others to overthrow his family. After chatting for an hour, Chen Li bade farewell and left. Before he left, Zhang Qingsheng took out a few pieces of paper with various medicinal ingredients written on it. He hoped that Chen Li would help him search for them. Chen Li immediately accepted it and expressed that he would try his best. Zhang Qingsheng prepared to concoct the beauty pill and the antidote for the demonic sex poison. The second prince, Zhang Ming, had given him many medicinal ingredients, but it was far from enough. The combination of alchemy and the spring and autumn medicine manual was a perfect match. There were many prescriptions in the book, but not many involved immortal cultivation, including the beauty pill. Zhang Qingsheng did not want to live his long life in old age. Night fell and Zhang Qingsheng continued to cultivate. The white dragon climbed to the windowsill and quietly looked at the moon. Under the moonlight, its snake body emitted a faint fluorescence. The next day, the 2 child Taoists whose memories had been tampered with by the phantom eye came. Zhang Qingsheng felt guilty towards them, so he taught them the Qi finger. Even though the Qi finger was a martial arts technique of the Chen family, Chen Li did not forbid him from spreading it to outsiders. Just like that, these 2 little Taoist children often came to visit Zhang Qingsheng. Zhang Qingsheng even gave them a name. The male child's name was Wan Li, and the female child's name was Minyu. Another season of autumn arrived. Due to the emperor's departure, the capital became livelier than before. There were more merchants and escort teams coming and going than before. Of course, there were also more crimes. Recently, Chen Li, who had been on duty in the capital's government office, felt extremely tired. He was not yet 30 years old, but he felt he was in his 40s. This was mainly reflected in his hair. More than half of his hair was white, and his brows were filled with worry. Zhang Qingsheng was worried that he would suddenly die, but he could not persuade him otherwise. The Yang family and the Hong family are fighting openly and covertly. Each of them is roping in civil and military officials, and they even have experts in the martial arts world. It seems like a dispute is about to break out in the capital. Perhaps they are the ones who lured the demonic sects here and used them as an excuse to take revenge to kill their opponents. Chen Li sighed as he was worried. Zhang Qingsheng said, then the Chen family must be careful. Chen Li shook his head and said, the Chen family did not take sides. Coupled with the fact that the family head is the Minister of Revenue, who would dare to touch the 6 ministers? They would only touch the minions of the various factions. Zhang Qingsheng felt that it was reasonable and did not remind him again. This time, Chen Li came mainly to help him deliver medicinal ingredients. There were hundreds of medicinal ingredients, and there were 10 sets of each ingredients. A total of 2 large chests were used to carry them up the mountain. Chen Li had prepared 90% of the prescription he gave, and it could be seen how attentive he was. After Chen Li explained the undercurrents in the capital, he quickly left. Zhang Qingsheng began to count the medicinal ingredients. The ingredients for the beauty pill were complete. As for Taoist Master King Su's antidote, he still had to carefully examine his injuries. Then, Zhang Qingsheng left the room to pay a visit to Taoist Master King Su. Taoist Master King Su rarely appeared in public. He had handed over all the important matters to Mangekyō Shuang. He had been staying in his quiet courtyard and meditating under the tree. No one knew if he was cultivating or comprehending life. Zhang Qingsheng came to him and bowed. Master, I have gained some comprehension in medicine and alchemy recently. Are you willing to let me examine your injuries? Taoist Master King Su did not open his eyes. Instead, he raised his hand and pulled open his sleeves, revealing a terrifying arm. His entire arm had turned black and his worm-like blood vessels had turned purple. Zhang Qingsheng stepped forward and examined it carefully. Taoist Master King Su asked, Qingsheng, do you have any designs for the conversation between Chen Li and you? Zhang Qingsheng answered, no. Every time he comes, other than giving gifts, he only talks about some miscellaneous matters. He doesn't ask any disciples to do anything for him, nor does he ask me to do anything for him. Taoist Master King Su nodded and continued, the Chen family has a complicated background and is not recognized by the various factions in the court. This is also the reason why I allowed him to come into contact with you. However, the Chen family is a double-edged sword. If you are not careful, you might be brought to the abyss by them. I know that they were officials in the previous dynasty. I know what I am doing. It's good that you know your limits. I haven't taught you anything since you were young, but I'm glad to see you now. The 2 princes have failed to rope you in. It seems like you already have your own thoughts and are not just exploring the truth. Taoist Master King Su revealed a kind smile. Zhang Qingsheng stared at him and could not help but ask, Master, can you tell me the story of you and His Majesty? Taoist Master King Su remained silent. Even though the conversation between the master and disciple was not completely exposed, they had a tacit understanding. Alas, that year, I had yet to become a Taoist master, and the emperor was not the emperor. We were from the same hometown. The city was breached, and our families were massacred. Only he and I escaped. The world only knew that I had contributed to saving the emperor. Little did they know that before I trained in martial arts, he had always protected me. Taoist Master King Su opened his eyes and looked at the leaves above his head as he fell into infinite nostalgia. Zhang Qingsheng listened attentively, wanting to understand what kind of person Zhang Yuan was. In Taoist Master King Su's story, Zhang Yuan was brave and loyal. In the face of desperate situations, he dared to take a gamble. He was also a charming person. No matter where he went, he would always obtain a group of loyal followers. After obtaining the support of the Yang family, Zhang Yuan completely rose to power. However, when Zhang Yuan founded the country and claimed the throne, he changed. That day, he stood on the heavenly arena in the palace and looked down at the officials, generals, and vast army below. It was as if he was looking down at all living beings, displaying the domineering aura of an emperor. I noticed the change in his expression among the crowd. He had changed. His expression changed from pride and joy to worry and fear. At that time, I knew that Zhang Yuan was not around anymore. Instead, it was replaced by Emperor Yuan, who wanted to be higher than the sky. Since ancient times, the emperor has always been lonely, and this trait has also appeared in the current emperor. His vision is not the current state, and his expectations for the prince are not ordinary father-son relationship. What he wants is the world, and what he really wants is 10,000 years of longevity. When Taoist Master King Su said that, his tone revealed strong admiration. Zhang Qingsheng understood what he meant. The old priest was speaking up for Zhang Yuan. Speaking of which, Zhang Qingsheng had only met Zhang Yuan once in his 18 years of life, but he had never really interacted with him. Taoist Master King Su shook his head and said with a smile, everyone wants to be an emperor, but who knows how difficult it is to be an emperor? My disciple, if you were an emperor, what kind of emperor would you be? Zhang Qingsheng shook his head and smiled. I don't know how to be an emperor, and I don't want to be one. Taoist Master King Su gave him a meaningful look. After the story was told and Zhang Qingsheng had finished his examination, he stood up and bade farewell. Taoist Master King Su watched him leave as if he wanted to see through his inner thoughts. Zhang Qingsheng smiled with his back facing Taoist Master King Su. Emperor? It was indeed fascinating. I am the crown prince, so why can't I fight for the throne? That crazy idea in Zhang Qingsheng's heart began to sprout. Zhang Yuan had thousands of reasons and stances, but none of them could fool him. Since you can deceive the world, I'll come too. Let's see whose methods are better. Zhang Qingsheng thought silently. The third level of the Dao technique could easily kill a peerless expert. No matter what, the fourth level could fight to a draw with a heaven or rival realm expert. As he had never seen a true heaven or rival realm expert, Zhang Qingsheng had to overestimate his opponent. When I reach the 5th floor, I will go to the sky-reaching palace. During the summer and autumn period when they were socializing, the capital was suddenly desolate. The cause was a plague. The limbs of those who contracted the plague were weak and their temperament became irritable. If they were to argue with someone, it was easy for their internal organs to rupture and they would die in pain. The illness broke out very quickly. During this period of time, Zhang Qingsheng was busy refining the beauty pill and Taoist Master King Su's antidote and was not out from seclusion. It was not until King Ku told him that he knew that a plague had struck. Longkai Temple had closed its doors and no longer accepted guests. Zhang Qingsheng did not think much of it. It was fine as long as he survived. He even started to look forward to the survival reward after the plague. On this day, he finally developed 3 beauty pills. He consumed one and from then on, his youth would last forever, maintaining the appearance of an 18-year-old for a long time. He did not know how long the effect of the beauty pill would last. In any case, if his appearance started to change, he would just consume another beauty pill. The antidote for Taoist Master King Su was rather troublesome. According to the spring and autumn medical manual's prescription, he was currently lacking a medicinal ingredient. However, he was not in a hurry as he still had 3 years. Chapter 15 Great Jing Bei, famous sword from the heavens late at night. Other than the palace, the entire capital was dark. Figures stood in the pavilions like ghosts. Their clothes fluttered in the wind. At a glance, there were at least 100 people. They suddenly disappeared from the eaves. That night, cries and screams sounded from all corners of the city, causing the entire capital to fall into uneasiness. Overnight, 186 people had died. All of them were from the mansions of officials. Among the casualties were young masters, young misses, and servants. Before dawn, the entire city began to search for the real culprit. Zhang Qingsheng, who was in Longkai Temple, heard some sharp cries from the city, but he was not curious enough to join in the fun. The incident outside the mountain had nothing to do with him. If anyone dared to cause trouble on the mountain, they would never return. Such days lasted for 3 days, and the capital was in turmoil. Everyone felt insecure. In the capital's government office, Chen Li looked at the corpses in the hall and frowned. A small official at the side said in a low voice, "Lord, the whereabouts of the demonic sect are secretive. This is not something our administrative office can interfere with. The strongest among us is only a first-rate expert, so we need to invite the White Guards." Chen Li sighed and said, "You think I didn't invite them? The White Guards has rejected my request." The low-ranking official was furious and indignantly said, "What do they mean? Right now, there are many casualties in the city. Since His Majesty is not here, the white-robed guards are unwilling to move. They are also receiving a salary.